Where is the list at?
All right, welcome to the first day of Wyoming Water Development Commission and Select Water Committee meeting. We'll call it to order. A few housekeeping things. First of all, please sign in if you haven't. Please check all your cell phones, make sure they're on silent or off. And also, for those of us up here at the front, please don't move your mics and be careful of what you say in sidebar conversations because we are going live over the internet. Okay, next item would be roll call. So, Clinton, Mr. Secretary, there you go.
Mick Bettis. Mick Bettis. Here. Aaron Bud Fallon. Here. David Evans. Gerald Geis. Here. Kellen Lancaster. Here. Sheridan Little. Here. Jeanette Seekin. Here. Larry Suker. Here. Rodney Wagner. Here.
Josh, what is it? Josh, call roll, please.
Senator Anselmi Dalton.
Here.
Senator Dostater.
Excused.
Senator Hicks.
Excused.
Senator Meyer. Here. Senator Moniz. Here. Representative Blake.
Excused.
Representative Eckles. Here. Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Norfolk.
Here.
Representative Paxton.
Here.
Vice Chairman Driscoll.
On his way.
Chairman Hunt.
Here. Right.
Okay. Next item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chief.
All right, moved by Commissioner Seekin, seconded by Commissioner Wagner. We approve the discussion on the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Yeah. Yeah, you guys are first.
Okay, Water Committee, can I get a motion for approval of minutes of last meeting at, in Green River?
Second.
Moved by Senator Moniz, seconded by Senator Anselmi Dalton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That carries.
All right, we have October 19th set of minutes from our special meeting.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Evans. We approve the meetings. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, audience introduction.
Right, I'm not listening.
I'm David Northrop, House District 50, which is Park County.
Kurt Meyer, Senate District 3, which is Niobrara, Goshen, and western counties up to Newcastle, down to the Laramie County line.
Excuse me, Karen Bud Fallon, Water Development Commission, representing the public at large.
Jeanette Seekin, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Division 3.
John Eklund, House District 10, it's southeastern Wyoming, eastern Laramie County, and Goshen County primarily.
Dan Larson, House District 25, near up in Powell.
Rod Wagner, Wyoming Water Development Commission, District 1.
David Evans, Commissioner, District 1, Cheyenne.
Gerald Geis, District 3, Bighorn Basin and Fremont County.
Sheridan Little, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Water Division 2.
Hans Hunt, House District 2.
Jerry Paxton, House District 47, which is most of south central Wyoming.
Lisa Anselmi Dalton, Senate District 12, which is in Rock Springs, Wyoming.
Glenn Moniz, Senate District 10, Albany County.
Larry Suker,
Water Development Commission, District 2.
Clinton Glick, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Wind River Reservation.
Kellen Lancaster, Wyoming Water Development, District 4, Western Wyoming.
Daniel Solish, Attorney General's Office.
Harry Labonte, Director of Water Development Office.
Josh Anderson, Legislative Service Office.
Katie Talbot, Water Development Office.
Jody Green, Water Development Office.
Brian Clarkman, Water Development Office.
Jason Mead, Water Development Office.
Barry Lawrence, Water Development Office. Greg Kerr, University of Wyoming Office of Water Programs.
Annie Daniel, Kleinfelder.
Danielle Zeta, Kleinfelder. Rachel Badger, Associates.
Andrew Van Olson Associates.
Chris Nicholson, Water Resources Data System.
Peter Gale, Water Development Office. Harlan Lancaster, Supervisor, Budget Conservation District.
Dave Morneau, Budget Conservation District.
Dave Roberts, City Chairman. John Nelson, North Fork Engineering, Saratoga.
Kathy Lestring, also Northport.
Robert Pitt, Sunrise Engineering. Marion Robinson, Bedford Water and Sewer District. Amy Shannon, Bedford Water and Sewer District. Kevin Boyce, Water Development Office.
Beth Calloway with the Wyoming State Engineer's Office.
Mike Matthew, Northwest Rural Water District. Cody Powell, and Lubbock.
Dan Hancock, Town of Evansville.
Brian Welsh, WLC Engineering. Jim Gores, James Gores Associates.
Brendan Tillman with James Gores and Associates.
Ricky Altenberg with Western Heritage Consulting and Engineering.
Eric Walker, Nelson.
Lee Garrett, LO Ranch, ISP staff. Brad Brooks, City of Cheyenne, Board of Public Utilities. Bruce Haddad, City of Cheyenne, Board of Public Utilities. Eli Cohen, Caleb Owen, Mark Hines, Dowell. Michael Hens, Suffolk County Conservation District.
Aaron Rivers, City of Denver.
Bruce Sheridan, ABI Engineering, Cheyenne. Alex Winfield, Alan Lust. Greg Roberts, Bedrock. Larry Warden.
Aaron.
Henry, WWDC Engineering. Carl Engineering Associates, and my City of Rollins. Eric Thomas, Hyper.
All right, thank you, welcome. With that, we'll get right into it. Planning amendment, Terry.
Mr. Chairman. If you go to tab D in your notebooks, the small notebook, we have then the closeout memos. And the first one we'll start with is the Powder Tongue Northeast River Basin Plan Update. Jody.
Mr. Commissioner, Commission members, Select Water. Yes, this is a contract amendment for the Powder Tongue Northeast River Basin Plan update that we're currently working on. And this is for a time extension only. So what we need to do is just have a little bit of extra time to vet the report with the public, pay some final bills, that type of thing. So we're asking for a 90-day extension to that contract. And again, it's time only. We want to make sure we have time to get the report out to the public and let them make comment on it and make sure we've incorporated all that into our product. And with that, I'd take any questions.
Second. Okay, moved by Commissioner Wagner, seconded by Commissioner Evans, that we approve the planning amendment for the Powder Tongue Northeast River Basin Plan Update, Level 1. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thanks, Jody.
Mr. Chairman, the next amendment is the Shell Valley Storage Level 2 Amendment Number 5. This is the Levitt Reservoir Expansion Project, and it's Amendment Number 5 because we've had a consultant on board since Level 2 Phase 1, hence the number of amendments. They've done the Phase 1 work, the Phase 2 work, and now they're our NEPA liaison contractor, kind of our go-between between our third-party NEPA contractor and the federal agency that's completing the EIS. And the reason for this amendment is throughout the initial effort in the EIS, data gaps have been identified by the BLM and their interagency group. Things such as we've had to go out and collect Utes lady tress or survey for Utes lady tress, it's a T&E species, do some additional cultural paleo work, wetland work, things of that nature to cover our entire project disturbance area. And we do have a discretionary task with our third-party NEPA contractor. That's the contractor that's actually putting together the environmental impact statement for the BLM. However, the way I've been working this is we also have a discretionary task with our NEPA liaison contractor. And when a data gap is identified in our contract with the third-party NEPA contractor, sorry, try to keep it straight here, they provided us a scope of work to do that data gap work and a budget to do it. We then provide that scope of work without a budget to our NEPA liaison contractor to get basically a competitive bid out of it. And it's coming back that we've saved money in doing that. So we've used up some of that discretionary money from our NEPA liaison contract. And we want to replenish that in anticipation of any data gaps that come out of the scoping with our cooperating agencies that just took place last week, because the NOI has now been published, the notice of intent, to officially kick off the EIS process. And so we're asking for $100,000 to amend into the contract for the NEPA liaison, as well as a time extension because the NOI was delayed for quite some time before it actually published. So we want to extend that by a year. With that, I'll ask if there's any questions. That was a little bit confusing with different contracts, but.
Moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Wagner, that we approve the planning amendment for the Shell Valley Storage Level 2 study. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The next amendment for your consideration is the First Amendment to the Medicine Bow Sierra Madre Ranges Final Design Permitting and Bighorn Range Siting Design Study. This is also a 90-day no-cost extension amendment, which would change the contract expiration date from December 31st, 2017 to March 31st of next year. This would allow us time to process the final project invoice and prepare a subsequent closeout memo. I should tell you that this contract with the National Center for Atmospheric Research is comprised of two separate efforts, the Bighorn feasibility piece and the Mid-Bow Sierra Madre final design. The Bighorn Range portion of the study was completed May 4th, earlier this year, and the final report for the Mid-Bow Sierra Madre study portion, the final design, will be completed on November 17th of this month. Public hearings have already been held on both study efforts. So again, this is just a 90-day no-cost extension to get that final bill and process the invoice.
Questions for Barry? Seconded by Commissioner Evans, that we approve the planning amendment for the Wetmont Medicine Bow Sierra Madre Ranges final design and permitting and Bighorn range siting and design study. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Carried. Carried. Okay, next is planning projects.
Mr. Chairman, under tab E, and again, the small notebook.
Daniel. Sorry, Harry.
Mr. Chairman, we do select water approval.
Oh, I apologize.
All right, committee, a motion on this. But moved by Senator Moniz, seconded by Representative Larson. Any discussion? Question? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, that goes. Thank you. Carry on, Mr.
Okay, now go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, under tab E in the small notebook, we have a number of project closeout memos for your consideration.
Mr. Chairman, the first closeout is for the Big Sandy Reservoir Enlargement Level 2 Phase 1 study. Valley Irrigation and Drainage District. It was basically a fatal flaw analysis of the Big Sandy enlargement to make sure there weren't any problems that wouldn't allow the project to go forward. We also looked at what the enlargement was actually going to consist of. Was it going to be 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet? What was the magnitude? as well as some environmental assessment support for the Bureau of Reclamation. So we had a contract with Wank Associates for $327,557.50. The final contract amount was $316,203.70 for a contract savings of $11,353.80. The gist of the project is basically to firm up the water yield for the Eden project for the district. There was a number of things that were looked at, including hydrologic modeling, hydropower evaluation, environmental analysis, economics, some survey work. And what that concluded with was we did have a feasible project, obviously. Just as a reminder, this is a project we looked at the August tour for those that were along with that. Determined there would be no net loss of wetlands. We were within the sage grouse core area, so we had to look at the executive order from the governor. We met those criteria, and it was determined that a 5-foot raise would be the best enlargement to move forward with. So with that, as Harry has mentioned yesterday and we've talked about before, we do have Colorado MOA funds that have been approved for this project, and it's now being handled by Reclamation. We had a public hearing on the draft results on October 12th of this year at the Eden Valley Irrigation District office in Farson. It was well attended. They were excited about moving the project forward. So the recommendation from our office is acceptance of the Big Sandy Reservoir Enlargement Level 2 Phase 1 report and the continued support of the reclamation process on completing the reservoir enlargement through the involvement of the office. And we provide a motion for you if you so choose.
And we got to hit public interest.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Bucktown.
So is this the last report that we have to do before this project actually is permitted and funded by Bureau of Rec?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. And the environmental assessment is currently out for public comment.
And did we, sorry, Mr. Chairman, did we do the environmental assessment of one of our consultants or was that Bureau of Reclamation?
That was, Mr. Chairman, that was Bureau of Reclamation through our technical service agreement, but we did provide some information for that document through our consultant.
Any other questions? Okay. Moved by Commissioner Wagner, second by Commissioner Seifert.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Did we accept the proposed motion for that?
so on the second page of that is the suggested motion, which also includes that you are finding the final report, the project is determined to be in the public interest, that's item 2, and that the project functions and services cannot realistically be provided by any person, association, or corporation engaged in private enterprise. Those are statutory requirements to move the project forward. So the motion hopefully should include all 3 of those items.
That's correct. Second. Any
Discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign.
Mr. Chairman, the next project closeout is the Cottonwood Irrigation District Master Plan.
For your consideration, the closeout memo for the Cottonwood Irrigation District Master Plan. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Cottonwood Irrigation District is located near Smoot, Wyoming. Our project manager on this project was Chase Tavelli. The project was authorized in 2016 with an appropriation from the legislature of $165,000. Our consultant was Sunrise Engineering. The contract was executed on June 22nd, 2016. Original contract amount was $138,636. Final contract amount, $133,631.50 for a contract savings of $5,004.50. The contract expiration date was June 30th, 2018. The level 1 master plan study inventoried and assessed the system, investigated conveyance losses, and made recommendations relative to the prioritization of pipe sections to be replaced, along with other system upgrades as needed. It should be noted that the Cottonwood system is 43 years old, and there's a strong sentiment that the district will not be able to keep up with the yearly repairs. And also, I should also tell you that the small part of the study did look at hydropower within the district. The study estimated that replacement of the entire system would cost approximately $12.6 million, which obviously is unaffordable to the district. In one fell swoop, there was a prioritization of specific projects where replacement and upgrades are most necessary and affordable. There were 12 individual projects identified across 3 different phases. Those involved replacing steel pipes used in areas of corrosive soils, replacing pipes along specific laterals that serve as a system backbone, and also making improvements to the system's intake. Non-structural improvements that were identified include increasing assessments to create additional funds for maintenance and/or large capital replacement projects. Again, there were 12 different projects identified. And I should also tell you that lastly, there was the piece of the hydropower. They did look at the potential for hydroelectric development and found 3 locations where hydropower generation was possible. However, given the rates that power companies are currently paying for power, around 3 cents per kilowatt hour, is not sufficient to make the project feasible at this time. The final presentation on this project was given in Afton on August 24th, 2017. Both the reports and the executive summary are available online. And our office's recommendation is that the study be considered final and closed out. And the Water Development Office also recommends proceeding to the next level of project development upon the submittal of an appropriate funding application by the sponsor. And I should tell you, you will see on tomorrow's agenda a recommendation for replacement of laterals 22 and 24, which is one of the projects identified, and that is on tab R2 of your notebook.
Commissioner Bettis.
When you put their initial application and they gave you their financial information for the district, does anyone run a cursory environmental analysis to find out whether this is affordable or not affordable to the sponsor, and to explain it to them? I guess this is the case, but I've looked at a couple of these other applications, and when you run through the economics just roughly, unless these irrigation districts or whatever can come up with millions of dollars, they're not going to do it. And to me, that's kind of a cursory thing. So how do we, I don't want to say this, how do we at the same time tell them that, yeah, we can do the project, but from an economic standpoint, realistically, when you talk to them, there is no way that they're going to want to cough up that kind of money to retrofit their whole system.
Mr. Chairman, yes, Commissioner Bettis, that was definitely part of the study, obviously not only to prioritize the needed improvements, but then also take it the next step. You've got to look at the economic analysis that was done as part of this study, and they are well aware of the increases that are going to have to be made on assessments and so forth to come up with their part of the match. So that was a key part of this study.
I guess what I'm asking is, when you run rough numbers before you even do the study, if you know what has to be prepared, I mean, you got a rough idea of what's going on after you talk to the sponsor. Do we say, are you going to proceed? Do you really want to proceed with this because it's going to cost you? You know, maybe you didn't come up with 12.1, but you could have come up with $7 or $8 million bucks. Do we then decide whether we're going to proceed or what we're going to do? I guess what I'm saying, do we then spend the taxpayers' money, even though we know that they're not going to be able to take this to the next level or want to, I guess?
So Mr. Chairman, this was a level 1 study, in essence, a master plan, and we do not do a review of their systems before we start the master plan or before funding requests are brought forward on these types of studies, because we don't know all of the intricacies of their system and what needs to be identified as replacement or repair. That's the purpose of the study. And then once all of those needed improvements are identified, that's when the economics come into it, in that what do they cost? We know what the funding is available through our program, and there is a local cost share, 33% currently. And then the community or the district in this case can make that decision of what they can afford moving forward. So the master plan really lays out a capital improvements program for 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years. And at that point, the district has to make the decision with each and every project application, level 3 application, can we afford it? they've identified what the cost is. So again, they have a financial plan that they can make those decisions. But we would be unable to make that kind of an analysis without having the master plan information in place. That's the purpose of the master plan.
I understand what you're saying, but I guess what I'm saying is that in our application, we asked them for all the financial information, number of acres, the number of users, how much the users are participating in the project. So you have a rough idea what kind of cash they're generating before the plan is even done, and how many users there are. You know, roughly, you may not know the exact number of footage or anything like that, but the amount of water that could be used or those kinds of things. I guess what I'm trying to say here is we go through a lot of effort, a lot of money, and a lot of these people, I would be surprised if they try to improve at any one of these people in all reality. So I guess what I'm asking is, when you upfront talk to this sponsor, do they realize that, I mean, they know their system. I guess, are they looking for a number or a way they think they can finance these improvements based on your ultimate financial analysis, or do they really believe that their participants are going to be able to cough up the kind of money that it's going to take to repair the system?
So Mr. Chairman, in this particular report, as the closeout memo indicates, there's been identified 11 projects in priority. So it really, the output of the plan is to develop, one, the capital improvements plan, and then in agreement with that is the economic plan. So the district can now pose those questions not only to their board but to their membership. And so you look at project one, they tend to handle these one or two at a time. Can we afford that? What's the local share? Do we need to raise assessments? But I can tell you, I don't think this is a situation where the district says, oh, we'll never be able to afford this. We're not going to do it. Because when the pipe breaks or the pipe corrodes and there is no longer water flowing down that pipeline to irrigated fields, it becomes much more of an emergency situation, and people then are inclined to say, I guess we need to assess ourselves additional dollars to raise the local share. At that point, you have the plan that identifies the scope of a particular project, and you have an estimated cost at that point, so they can do that economic planning. So I think to try to judge that before you start the master plan, if I understand that's the question, is very difficult because, again, we don't know the conditions of the system, the components, and that's the whole point of the master plan.
Well, and also, they're coming to us for level 3 funding tomorrow, right? He said. So I really don't see where the argument is here, at least on this particular project. Well, they're coming to us for level 3 funding. They're asking for money, and so they're going to be responsible for their match on top of that too. So obviously, they think they can come up with the money, is what I'm saying, for the projects.
I think we had this discussion, a similar discussion in Saratoga last summer. On a master plan, they last for 10 to 15 years. They set out a dozen things that should be done or are recommended to be done. You might go 3 or 4 years with no projects being done in that community or with that district just because they're trying to figure out the money situation. And then they'll do 2 or 3 projects. I think by the end of a master plan, there's always some projects that they don't get to and that are probably going to be included in the next master plan. But I think that's the nature of a master plan, is you got to do the plan first, and then these communities have that tough work of figuring out how to pay for it. But I doubt if there's any master plans out there where some good project haven't come out of it over the life of the plan. So I just think that's the nature of the master plan.
Senator Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Harry, I'm just wondering how much more of a detail at the end of when you've done the facilities, I guess, assessment, that you have a meeting with these folks as far as financial ability assessment and tell them that, okay, this is what's wrong. It's going to take X amount of dollars over a time period, because some of these things are going to have to be done within 10 years. They're not 15 years away. You have that time period when the project should be done. Lay that out and say, now, this is how much money the state will come up with. You have to put your rates in line to come up with this amount of money to have your system. That's what the plan says. And kind of help them along a little bit so we're not spinning our wheels in here with could be a situation where you get a master plan, but there's just no way to pay for it. Then I'm just wondering how much more detailed or in depth would that be? And if you don't know, maybe come back with the answer.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Meyer, what I would say in that regards is the first thing is the facility assessment. What components are out there? What condition are they in? How much longer may they last? If they need to be replaced, what those costs would be. And then with that follows the economic analysis. Okay, then how might the entity fund this? Are programs available? For municipalities, there are other funding sources. And so those discussions start, the consultant is involved, but that all culminates in the project closeout meetings that are held, and those are public meetings with the sponsors there, and the results of the report are laid out. So it does represent, I think, from the sponsor's perspective, a plan that they can show to their constituents, their members, their irrigators in this case, of here's what we're looking at in order to keep this system operable. And it does, I think, provide a good springboard to start the discussion. Do we need to raise our assessments going forward? Because here are the facilities that are in need of improvement. So I think it really does lend and promote that type of a discussion.
I think the other thing that we've seen too, Harry, is that some of these guys will come in and their assessments are so low that if they had standard assessments equal to what most people have in the state, they could just fix it and they wouldn't have to come to us. And that really is hard for at least myself. I'm not sure about everybody else.
Any other questions? Okay, so we need a motion on this one.
I would move to accept the proposed motion on page 2 of the Cottonwood closeout memo.
Second, Mr. Okay, moved by Commissioner Evans, seconded by Commissioner Wagner, that we approve acceptance of the closeout of this project.
Any discussion on the motion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, the next project for closeout then is the Eden Valley Irrigation District Master Plan.
Mr. Chairman, the Eden Valley Irrigation and District Master Plan, this is the closeout memo for this project. The project was appropriated $195,000. The contract amount was $135,718. You do see that the final contract amount is still to be determined. We are continuing to work on the draft report of that. Eden Valley had not had a master plan ever done on their system, so as you can imagine, it's been quite extensive to go through everything that we need to go through. So we're just looking, again, we're right now just wrapping up the final report, and we'll have that done by the contract expiration date of June 30 of 18. Again, this was a master plan that just wanted to inventory and assess their system, investigate piping and lining some of their canals and laterals. looking into SCADA. They've got a sand trap that is not functioning correctly, and some outlet works that aren't functioning well either. So for those of you, I think most of you know where Eden Valley Irrigation and Drainage District is, just right outside of Farson. We passed through part of that in our August tour. And you can look there at those bulleted points about what we were trying to get done with the study, our objectives of that. On the second page of the closeout memo gets to more of the project findings and recommendations that the consultant found as we went through this master plan. And those bulleted points, a lot of them, of course, were in a area with high salts, so they're looking at door pipe, quite a few of these canals. So that's the majority of the projects that you see then listed in Table 1. So it's quite an extensive list of projects there that they have planned out for the next few years. Eden Valley Irrigation District can also take advantage of salinity control funds, some Basin States funds, and some Water Smart funds. So you'll see that broken down in the table that's provided there, and how that plan is to go about funding those projects as we go through the years in this canal system. So we did have a public meeting on August the 10th at the Eden Valley District Office. Commissioner Bettis was able to join us for that project summary. The project can be found online, and so I would just recommend the proposal move to the next level. We do have, of course, 2 projects that are before you that are not recommended for funding. That was part of the 2 projects that were in Table 1. So I just wanted to point that out. So the proposed motions are there listed, and if I'll take any questions of anyone.
Chairman? Jody, how much is, since we don't have a final amount in order to do a closeout, where do we stand on what's been spent so far?
Right now, we're at $129,000, so we're below.
Expect it to go to the contract amount or stay below?
No, we're done. We're just wrapping up things, and I think it'll stay right at that. So we'll be below the original contract amount.
Question for you, I think. Doesn't really sound like we're really closed out of this project. So can we really vote to close it out yet, or?
That was going to be my next question to the Attorney General. Can we really close it out,
yeah,
or should
to
we wait
Daniel,
to
I
our
guess that
next
would be
meeting,
another
I guess?
question towards him too, yeah. Whoever can answer it, I guess.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what we were trying to provide to you here with this closeout memo is that information that's been on. The report is in essence done. Is it 100% finished? No. But the district was bringing 2 applications for level 3 construction funding, and so wanted to make sure you had this closeout information before you considered their request for level 3 funding. So you could certainly defer this to your next meeting until it is 100% closed out if you'd like.
Especially if the projects aren't going to be.
Mr. Chairman, I think I would feel better deferring it because something could happen and, I mean, unforeseen, the life of the unforeseen, unintended consequences or whatever. So if there's nothing that would prohibit us from postponing approving the closeout, I'd feel more comfortable doing that at our next meeting.
There's no reason why we can't still consider their applications for funding, even though we haven't closed this out yet, is there?
Mr. Chairman, I think certainly in the past, the commission has moved level 3 projects forward when a level 1 is nearing completion. That's your choice. I think at least in the last couple of years, there's been discussion that you want to complete these studies before you move to the next level. And so again, what we're trying to do is not put a 1-year gap in the funding consideration. So if this report isn't 100% complete and you choose not to consider funding applications, then that sets them back until now September 1st before they can submit a level 3 application. But you have those applications, level 3 applications in front of you, and we'll consider those tomorrow. So I think really you can go either way.
Mr. Chairman, I know we haven't heard it, but you're recommending not to you have a do not recommend for these.
Mr. Chairman, on this district's, they brought 2 funding applications, and my recommendation is not to fund due to the lack of funding in account 2, lack of available funds.
And Harry, after our marathon meetings, last month, earlier October, whatever month this is, when are we going to our new schedule? So could they bring their application in our new time frame, or so it wouldn't be September, or guess what?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Seekin, the new schedule for applications, and this is a good question, brings out public outreach in terms of getting the information out to the public. The new application schedule is March 1 for level 1 or level 2 applications. It is September 1 for level 3 applications. So the next logical step for Eden Valley is to move into level 3 applications. So it would be September 1.
Well, I tend to agree with Jeanette. I think that I would feel a lot more comfortable closing this project out when it's actually closed out. But I don't see any problem with considering their application for level 3.
I agree with that. I would agree with that.
Go ahead and move forward with considering them tomorrow.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Postpone this until, what's our next meeting, January, to do the closeout on this, so. Feelings, I can't do anything, so.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we delay making a decision on this closeout memo until the project is actually completed. However, I would also recommend that we take up their funding applications tomorrow, despite the fact that we don't have an official vote on the closeout memo on level 1.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Bud, seconded by Commissioner Seekin, that we table this closeout until completion of the project, full completion of the project, and that we go ahead and consider their applications for level 3 funding tomorrow. So any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say the sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next project for closeout consideration is the Hanover Irrigation District Master Plan, Phase 1. Peter is here.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Peter Gill with Water Development Office. I'm here to close out the Hanover Irrigation District Master Plan Phase 1 project. There is currently an ongoing Phase 2 of this project. The original appropriation amount for Phase 1 was $175,000. The Phase 2 included cost is $295,000. The current contract is with Western Heritage Consulting and Engineering. The original contract amount with Western Heritage was $170,000. We don't have a final contract amount because this is Phase 2 of that same project. So we're still in Phase 2, but we are done with Phase 1.
And so Highland Hanover.
And Highland Hanover is the reason this project was extended to the Highland Hanover Irrigation District as well. But the Upper Hanover is complete. So that's where we're at. The Upper Hanover is just south of Worland. It serves approximately 13,000 acres and 520 landowners. This level 1 study provides an inventory and assessment of the system, operational efficiency analysis, a water rights analysis, and a prioritization of projects and conceptual designs for those projects as well. The project findings are highlighted on page 2 and prioritized. There is $16.9 million worth of projects identified, and they are prioritized on table 1, which is on the second page. The office recommendation for this project is to moving to a level 2 and a level 3 based on the projects, the system inventory, and the economic analysis that was included in the level 1 study. Tomorrow, the district will be here to discuss their level 2 and level 3 projects that are recommended.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Seeger.
Peter, it looks like we're kind of in the same situation as with the last project. Could you tell me where we are on the contract amount right now, even though it's not, still to be determined?
Yeah, we are roughly $163,000.
You expect it to go much further?
Not on phase 1.
Okay. So you're really just finalizing, you're in the same relative situation as the last project, or is it a little bit, or?
The last project was not quite complete in terms of the overall project. This is going from the phase 1, which is complete, to the phase 2, which.
When do you think that this will be actually ready to close out, since we're?
Not until next year at this time.
So.
A little bit different. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, just so everybody's clear, the initial project that was approved, Highland Irrigation District Master Plan, looking at the Hanover Irrigation District, you then had a subsequent request for Highland Hanover, separate irrigation district, but they have the same diversion point. So water's brought down the same canal and then it's brought into another district. So we had a consultant involved with the first phase of this, and rather than bring a different consultant in to look at the additional district, we amended their contract. So that's why phase 1 is complete, but the Highland Hanover or Upper Hanover is not yet complete because it started a year later, and that's why it will take another year to complete that. So.
Really, Hanover was built probably in the 30s or 40s. And then they came in about 1964. And from Winchester to you cross East Fork and Lowater, both canals were in the same canal. Then when you get it on the north side of East Fork and Lowater, then they pump the water out of that to the upper, the other Hanover Canal. And that's where they separate. But they're both, where this project is, they're both, the water's coming across the Bighorn River by Winchester, and that's all just one canal, but operated by both outfits.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Bud.
So you said that that these guys are going to bring projects to us tomorrow. Can you tell us on this list which one of those they are?
Sure. It is a level 2 study to look at options or alternatives for replacing the Bighorn River flume. It takes water from one side of the Bighorn River to the other. It's approximately a 200-foot span across multiple river channels. Pretty big project, and it's listed here as in the table one alternative. So they're looking at option to either rehabilitate the existing bridge and flume that is there versus rebuild it or replace it. So that is the level 2 that will be before you tomorrow, and the level 3 is priority number 2 in your table for the Cottonwood spill and check structure replacement.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Sucre, that we approve acceptance of the phase 1 of the Hanover Irrigation District.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chairman, the next project for closeout the Melody Ranch Improvement and Service District, or excuse me, Melody Ranch Water Supply Study, Level 1 study. Kevin?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you? I guess before I begin a short closeout review on the next two projects, I just want to inform you that I have not received final billing on either. However, the final contract amount is what the consultant has told me that will be an amount that will not be exceeded. So if you wish to table this to the next meeting, sir.
Do either one of these projects have?
Both projects have level 3 continuation applications you'll see later today. Yes.
And go ahead and walk through the closeout.
Okay. Okay, first under the appropriate tab is the Melody Ranch Water Supply. Level 1 sponsors Melody Ranch Improvement Service District located in Teton County. Melody Ranch is a large residential district south of Jackson in the South Park area, adjacent to another district we've worked with in the past called Rafter J. The water supply, the master plan study was funded by the 2016 legislature to evaluate the current condition of the district's water system, supply, storage, transmission, distribution, to determine the ability of the system to operate with increasing demands and identify options for increasing their efficiencies. They are a system that is approaching the 25 years of service. The consultant that conducted the level 1 is Nelson Engineering in Jackson. The contract was executed June 14th of 16. The original contract amount, $173,346. The final contract amount, as I said, that the consultant will not exceed is $159,622.96 for an anticipated contract savings amount of $13,723.04. I do have the final report. The Melody Ranch Level 1 supply study conducted a hydrogeologic investigation to select a new well selection. They developed a well design, produced cost estimates for Level 3 water supply improvements that you'll see later today, as I said. The eligible project, WWDC eligible project components would be drilling and completing of a new well number 3, replacement of some short segments of transmission line, 2 short segments of transmission lines. This system is not fed or served by a gravity system. It is served by a storage tank and boost pumps. There will be anticipated replacement to the boost pumps. Non-eligible project components are distribution system repairs and an isolation valve replacement. A report of the presentation of the final report was conducted August 9th this year in Jackson. We will conduct a hearing on level 3 if that's approved later, on the first week of December. That's all on that one, Mr. Chairman.
On the Melody Ranch project, Senator Meyer.
You've got 800 gallons permitted capacity. That's
A little over 1 million gallons per day as far as capacity. You got a 300,000 gallon tank. Why do they want to drill another well? Why can't they just build a bigger tank? Because they've got enough wells to fill that 3.84 times a day.
I can't speak for the sponsor, but they have limited area to build a new tank. They felt that the new supply would be provide, the aquifer has storage, so to speak. So rather than build a tank that equals or exceeds the size of the existing tank, they can drill a shallow well and keep their existing storage tank.
Oh, well. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Motions?
Chairman, question. What kind of agreement do you have for the not to exceed this amount?
Excuse me, question?
What kind of agreement do you have that states the not to exceed
I have
this
the word of
amount?
the consultant.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Evans. Approve the closeout of the Melody Ranch water supply level one study. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, under the next tab, you will find the closeout memo for the Newcastle Madison well study. This is a level 2 study conducted by the Commission for the City of Newcastle, Wyoming and Weston County. This was a study that produced a new water supply well for the City of Newcastle. It was recommended in a earlier master plan that was conducted in the year 2000 to a replacement well, so to speak, of the Newcastle #1 well, which was drilled in 1949. The Newcastle well, #1 well is still in commission. It is still the highest producing well in Newcastle's portfolio of 4 wells now. If that well went down, Newcastle would be in difficult straits. So we were fairly certain since 2000 that Newcastle would come in for this application for a new well, which they did in 2004. The consultant who was hired to conduct this work is Wester Wetstein Associates out of Laramie, Wyoming. The contract was executed June 8th of 2015. The original contract amount was $1,192,588. The final contract amount, as I said, that is the estimate now and not to be exceeded, is $1,058,922.45. That is a anticipated contract savings of $183,665.55. The project drilled, completed, and tested a 2,915-foot Madison well just north of the city limits of Newcastle. Drilling site work began on November 2016. Completion and testing was completed in March of this year. The result is a new flowing artesian well, well number 5, ready to be incorporated into Newcastle's existing well field. You will see a level 3 application later today to connect the new well to the system, to replace collection pipelines, and also the legislation, if approved, would allow the sponsor, the City of Newcastle, to acquire the level 2 well, to purchase the level 2 well at 33% of the drilling contract price, And that price that they would purchase the well is $212,228.28. A level 2 hearing was held before the Newcastle City Council on September 5th, 2017 at their city hall. And if you have any more questions on this, I'd certainly like to answer them.
I just want to clarify, the motion says acceptance of the High Meadow Ranch Level 2 project report. I presume that's a typo? Because that's near Pinedale, I think.
Oh, that's a typo. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I'd make a motion then
Yeah,
to,
we mean the Newcastle Madison wells.
would make the proposed motion on page 2 of the Newcastle Madison well study closeout memo, substituting the language Newcastle Madison well study for High Meadow Ranch Level 2 project report.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Evans, seconded by Commissioner Wagner, that we approve closeout of the Newcastle Madison well study level 2. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I was having a hard time following you. So as a result of this study, then later today, we're going to see exactly what?
There's a level 3 application before you later today. And the level 3 application, because in level 2, we drill, case, complete, and test a well, and then cap the well.
And that's the number 4 well.
That's the number 5 well, the brand new number 5 well. So the level 3 will be the well house. Of course, this is a flowing well. There's no pump. Well house, power to well house, transmission line from the new well down the hill to the existing Newcastle collection system, pump house. And there's also in level 3, there are some upgrades to transmission lines from their number 1 and number 4 wells. You also see some telemetry and SCADA involved in that. And then also in the legislation that the authorization for the acquisition of the well will be written into the construction bill.
Okay.
So in level 2, we just drill the well and leave it. So level 3 connects the well to the system, Mr. Chairman.
Any more questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, the next closeout memo, it deals with the Northwest Rural Water District Master Plan.
Mr. Chairman, for your consideration, the project closeout memo for the Northwest Rural Water District Master Plan. Our project manager on this project was Dave Meyer. The project was authorized in 2016 by the legislature in an appropriation amount of $230,000. Our consultant was Dow LLC. Contract was executed on June 27th, 2016, an original contract amount of $226.40. The final contract amount was that same amount, so there was no contract savings. The expiration date on the contract was June 30th, 2018. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Northwest Rural Water District manages 10 separate water service areas in northern Bighorn and Park counties. It's situated in a corridor from the Buffalo Bill Reservoir near Cody and continues northeast along Highway 14A to areas near the towns of Lovell and Franning. This level 1 study evaluated the current water systems and its ability to serve existing and new taps. The completed study modeled the existing systems and also evaluated the capacity of the district's facilities and their ability to accommodate future growth. A lot of tasks were completed as part of this study. Some of the most critical ones were assembling record drawings of completed projects and creating a GIS, which contained detailed information on the system components. Also developing a hydraulic model to analyze the existing system, as well as to aid in the preliminary design of the proposed improvements. Identifying components that required repair or replacement within the next 20 years and develop cost estimates was also a very critical task. And then analyzing the district's finances, water rates, debts, and budgets, and funding strategies in regards to current financial needs and proposed improvements. Project findings that were detailed in the study include existing water uses, population growth and demand scenarios, system capacity, system operations, and then proposed improvements and recommendations for each of the 10 service areas. So there you can see a list of recommended improvements, 25 different projects. Of those projects, you'll see and a proposed timeline for implementing those improvements. The first 3 listed on the table are coming before you for advancement to level 3 this year. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. In addition to structural recommendations, as listed in the table, also non-structural or operational recommendations were made. Here again, there were some more critical than others, and some of those that were really critical was not allowing construction to take place above the high service elevation areas. Also following the GIS recommendations as described in the report, updating the water model on an annual basis at the same time as the GIS is being updated, and then continuing a very proactive approach to rate increases to cover Shoshone municipal pipeline increases and inflations costs. The final report presentation on this project was given July 20th to the public in Cody at the Park County Library. And then our office's recommendation ultimately is to proceed to the next level of project development upon the submittal of an appropriate funding application by the sponsor. And as I mentioned, they are coming to you for level 3. They've got a level 3 application. They're coming to you later today on the agenda. You'll see a recommendation for transmission lines and storage tanks, a new pump station, so forth. That is for the north end and the Sage Creek service areas, and that is found in your notebook in tab G. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Barry?
Mr. Chairman, I propose that we accept the proposed motion by the WWDC.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Weiser, seconded by Commissioner Seacon, that we move acceptance of the Northwest Rural Water District Master Plan, Level 1 study. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Next item is update of level 3 construction projects.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, turn that over to Brian.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Under tab F, we have 8 updates on level 3 construction projects. 3 projects have progressed to the construction phase, and we had 5 projects that were closed out. The first project is the Bighorn Canal Rehabilitation 2012 project. This is a canal system improvement project. Dale Anderson is the project manager. This project is moved to closeout. We had an appropriation of $1,440,000. WWC's share of that project was $1,324,060.33. So we had a reversion into account 2 of $115,939.67. Any questions on that project? The next project is the Bighorn Canal Underway project. This is a drainage structure project. Again, Dale Anderson is the project manager on this particular project. This project is advanced to the construction phase. On May 23rd of this year, we had a bid opening. There were 4 bids received. The low bidder was Dale Weaver, Wyoming, with an engineer's estimate of $139,532.03. The contract amount was $171,918. The next project is the Deaver Irrigation District Rehabilitation 2009 project. This is an irrigation system rehabilitation project. Again, Dale Anderson was the project manager. This project has closed out. This particular summary is a 2-page summary. So on the back side of that particular sheet is the project closeout summary. There's a total appropriation of $1,023,000. WWDC expenditures were $878,378.26. So there's $144,621.74 reverted back into account 2. The next project is the Deaver Transmission Pipeline Project. This is a transmission pipeline project for the town of Deaver. This project is advanced to the construction phase. We had a bid opening on August 16th. 5 bids were received. DRM out of Gillette was the low bidder. The contract amount was $1,294,026.55. The next project is the Dull Knife Reservoir Spillway Rehabilitation Project. This is a dam upgrade project. Bill Brewer is the project manager. The bid opening was June 8th. The low bid, I'm sorry, the low bidder was Big Sky Civil Contractors. The contract amount was for $5,300,589.50. The number of bids was 4. You'll notice that the range of bids was $6.8 million to $8.6 million, yet the contract amount was for 5.3. There wasn't enough money to award the entire project, and so they awarded just the portion that covers the dam safety costs, and they deferred the non-dam safety items. Harry will be discussing an amendment request tomorrow for this particular project.
This project is located between Buffalo and Warren, 320 mountains, about 12 miles south of State Hill. The road goes right down on
The next project is a Hard Mountain Rehabilitation 2012 project, or 2010 project. It's an irrigation system rehab project. Project manager is Dale Anderson. This particular summary is a 2-page summary also. So on the back side of that sheet, you see the project closeout summary. The total appropriation was $1,990,000. Expenditures was $1,963,074.45. We reverted $26,925.55 back into account 2.
Questions?
Okay, the next project is a Kirby Rehabilitation 2011 project. This project is also an irrigation system rehab project. Dale Anderson's a project manager. This project was closed out. The total appropriation amount was $502,410. WWC expenditures were $497,009.94. We had a reversion of $5,400.06 into account 2.
Questions?
Last project is the Shoshone Irrigation District Rehabilitation 2015 project. This is an irrigation system rehab project. Project manager is Dale Anderson. This project was also closed out. The total appropriation was $290,000. WWDC expenditures were $195,305.06. So reverted back into account 2 was $94,694.94.
Thanks, Brian. All right, now we get to go into the funding recommendations out of account 1. As a point of order, before we get started, we're expecting a call from State Engineer Pat Terrell at around 10 o'clock, which it's getting close to that now. So when he gets on, we might jump the weather modification Wind River Mountains item up whenever it gets called in. So, but until then, we'll just go down the list. So, Harry.
So, Mr. Chairman, we're starting into a water account 1, new development projects. Again, within your notebooks, you'll find 3 spreadsheets that summarize each of the funds. You might pull those out if you want to kind of follow along. First project for consideration is under tab A in the large notebook. And this is the Gillette Regional Extensions Phase 4, 2018. So this is the 4th project dealing with extending transmission lines out from the Gillette-Madison project to these outlying districts. This particular request will then bring in the Fox Ridge Improvement and Service District, the Rosette Ranchettes Improvement and Service District, and the Buckskin Improvement and Service District. As we've talked about at past meetings, the early on kind of general assessment of cost to bring all of these outlying districts into the Gillette-Madison system was about a $60 million overall expenditure. And with this fourth project, it brings the total at least funded, including this fourth one, to just under $12 million towards that $60 million total project. This particular request, total cost for the extensions for those three districts, $2.7 million. The sponsor is seeking a $1,809,000 grant. And then the sponsor is responsible for the 33% local share. I believe capital facility sales tax is available for that. So with that, we have representatives of the sponsor here, so I'd be happy to answer questions. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Levi Jensen. I'm the project manager with the City of Gillette. I'd be happy to take any questions from you or the commission or committee about this project.
Commissioner Rudfound.
So how many more projects and miles do we have to go to be able to complete this?
Overall, for all the districts that we plan to connect in the designated service area, we have 21 water service agreements signed for districts within the service area right now. This will get us through, I believe, 18 of those. We have one large extension line yet to go up to the airport. It's under the Campbell County's jurisdiction. It would also have the opportunity to serve the Means district, which is another one of the largest districts in the service area. Beyond that, some of the other ones have not signed service agreements that we've included within the designated service area. Some we expect to that may or may not yet. Means would be one of them that has not signed yet. Some of the longer ones out by Rosette have not, like the Ward Creek district, for example, that's part of that $60 million budget that Harry mentioned. I have not seen any interest from those districts in particular yet. Expect to do the application next year for that airport line. And I don't have that budget number right off the top of my head, but I can certainly provide that.
No, that's fine. I'm just trying to figure out how much longer.
Mr. Chairman, your tap fees, when you have a district, who gains by the tap fee? Is that a fee that's paid to the city of Gillette at the time someone taps the line?
For these districts that were in existence before the joint powers agreement was signed, the tap fee or system development charge is waived for all of the taps within those districts and the district itself. If that district were to expand, we would assess a tap fee or a system development charge for each of those new taps within that district. Same goes for taps within the City of Gillette corporate limits, and that would go to benefit the regional system for production, treatment, transmission.
So with these, they are waived.
They are. Yeah, for the districts that were in existence before the joint powers agreement was signed. If a new district were to form and connect to the regional system after that date, they would pay system development charge for their connection.
Is there also a pre-annexation agreement?
No, there's not. Our joint powers agreement prohibits us to do a pre-annexation agreement for the purpose of getting water from the regional system.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, are we going to do these in a group, our approval? How are we going to do this?
I think it would probably be quickest if we handled them in groups.
Thank you.
That, is there any other questions for the sponsor? Okay.
Thanks, Levi. So, Mr. Chairman, I am informed that Pat Terrell is on the phone. Pat, are you there?
Harry, I am here, although I have to say when folks are speaking on that end, it comes across a little jumpy here, so I get about every other word. I don't know if that can be fixed or not, but in the event I get questions, I want to make sure I can hear them.
Okay. So Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is we move to the weather modification program. That's under tab I of your notebook. And so let me just kind of refresh everybody's memory with regards to this proposal. This is for the winter operations for the winter of 2018-19, so next winter. And it would continue the operation of 10 weather modification seeding stations that are scattered up and down basically the west side of the Wind Rivers, but there is one on the east side of the Wind Rivers. And so previously, the last 4 years, well, this winter and the previous 3, the funding scenario has been state of Wyoming, 75% other water users or interested parties. And that 75% funding has flowed mainly from the states of Arizona, Nevada, and California. So for at least the last 2 years, and really the discussion goes back before that, there has been discussion to look at a basin-wide or system-wide funding model. Okay, so Colorado currently has an active weather modification program in the Colorado River Basin, so does Utah. Downriver states have provided funding to those 2 states, Utah and Colorado, as well as Wyoming. But the funding they've provided to Colorado and Utah has been 50% of the weather modification cost, not 75%. So as this discussion has evolved from a basin-wide program, the last couple of years, it's really taken the form now of a draft agreement that has been provided. And that draft agreement is a 9-year agreement, which would set in place funding for the next 9 years coming from the lower basin states to the upper basin states. The provision in the agreement is 50% funding. It makes it consistent with Colorado and Utah, or Wyoming share there. And I can tell you that Jenny Cederly, who was our weather mod expert, who is no longer with Water Development. She's moved on to a different job. But Barry Lawrence, certainly very familiar with weather mod through all of the work that the state has done. We've been negotiating that agreement, and we have been saying all along, we want 75-25. And at this point in time, that agreement is very near to final form. It's still a draft, but very near to final form. And the other states have pushed back and said, no, we need to have a consistent program throughout the basin, and that means 50-50 funding. So the request from Water Development Office to you, the commission, is to bring in the 50-50 funding scenario in 2018-19. What that means in real dollars is that the overall program cost for 1 year, $480,000. So with a 50-50 funding scenario, we are asking for half of that, $240,000, plus the $10,000 that is used by the office for administration of those contracts in the program. The difference to the state of Wyoming from the 75-25 split versus 50-50 is that Wyoming would be required to pay an additional $120,000 towards the winter operations for that winter. And I guess the benefits of this 9-year agreement is that it really does set in place consistent funding from those lower basin states that they have pledged that they will continue to fund this on a 9-year program. There are a couple of stipulations that the program would be discontinued for a year if the lake levels in Powell and Meade do come up. That's within the agreement. But we're a long ways from that point right now due to the drought that's really been running since the 2000s. So I think with that overview, the proposal is a 50-50 funding scenario going forward, $250,000 request for that single year. And with Pat, I guess at that point, I would turn it over to you if you have additional comments.
Thank you, Harry, and good morning, members of the commission and Select Water. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to weigh in on this program as I saw what Harry was working on because of my work along with Steve Wolf and Chris in our work with drought contingency planning in the basin, and the fact that our weather mod program in Wyoming, which supplements the ones in Utah and Colorado, as you heard, 3 focal points of that program, and I was wanting to make sure that we did everything we could to keep Wyoming's weather mod activities in that program and as our part of the drought contingency planning in the upper basin. In the lower basin, they are doing even harder work and a lot more work because of overuse down there, to the point where they are looking at a plan that has them, if water levels drop further in Lake Mead, reducing their use by up to an additional 1.1 million acre feet. And so they're doing pretty heavy lifting down there. What we're doing in the upper basin is this weather mod program for the 3 states mentioned, plus working on drought operation agreements of federal reservoirs and demand management. And my main goal in this was that Wyoming stay engaged in the program, which appears that will occur at the 50-50 funding level. I certainly understand how we got started off at 75-25, and yet the program to be consistent with the other basin states would put us there at a increase in cost to Wyoming, of course, as Harry just mentioned. What I'm a little nervous about, I guess, is that if we remain at 75-25 and can't recover the other 25% somehow, and I know Barry has beat the bushes pretty hard, that we may not be able to operate that program in our Wind River Mountains. And then the concern there is it appears Wyoming is walking away from our part of that part of the drought contingency plan. So I was there when we talked about funding levels 2 years ago. I'm very aware of the sensitivities of our budget and of the certainly the concerns expressed by both the Commission and Select Water at that time. But now we're at a point where we have a new minute with Mexico that has put additional pressure on the lower basin to get their planning done. And both the upper and lower basin drought contingency plans need to work in lockstep. And I'm trying to simply bring my point of view here that for the upper basin's drought plan in this particular basin to hang together, I think that I would support Harry's program. That way we get a 9-year agreement to go forward, a little less money from the outside, a little more from Wyoming. But I think the benefits of the program are substantial. I know that, well, even in years like this last year, where we had enormous runoff in the green, a lot of that went into Lake Powell. It wasn't quite enough for us to recover and get both reservoirs full, but it was a very helpful year, and a lot of our folks in that basin saw a lot of water. Hopefully some of that was attributable to the water development program early in the winter, even though it had to be suspended at one point because we had so much snow. I do think it's a valuable program, and for the long-term participation in that drought contingency planning, I thought Harry's proposal was reasonable, and that's why I thought it important at least to express my opinion on why we need that. And the letter, I think, that I sent to Harry last week and that he forwarded, I think fairly well speaks for itself. We did mention in the report that this agency submitted to the Commission and Select Water a year ago. We talked about this drought contingency planning and the 3 plan, and so There's a little bit of reference that could be made back there, pages 51, 52 of that report. I didn't get into, or we didn't get into in great depth in that report, the cost share issue. But nonetheless, it is in that sort of overall fabric of the Colorado River that I'm referring to. And with that, I think that's my short introduction, Mr. Chairman, and I would stand for questions.
Questions for Pat or Harry? Commissioner Lancaster.
If we have Mother Nature drops us a big snowstorm like last year, we're still obligated for our funding.
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lancaster, the way the agreements work is that there's a cost share for all expenses in the program. And when we get into a year last year where the program was suspended early because of the large snowpack, then the costs of the program are reduced because there is not a need at that point in time for additional chemicals, propane. There's some labor savings at that point in time. That we still have forecasters involved because if the program, if the snowpack decreases where we come out of suspension, it could restart the program. But there are cost savings. But at the end of the year, those cost savings currently are the 75% is borne by the lower basin or other parties and 25% by Wyoming. So there are reductions in cost if we have an early suspension.
So I'm sorry, I was following your answer until the very end. So if there's if there is a cost savings, who retains that cost savings?
Well, the way the agreements work that we currently have and what is proposed going forward is that the costs are currently shared 75% other parties, 25% Wyoming. So we get an invoice from our contractor, then Wyoming pays 25% of that. We submit that to the lower basin, and they have actually, are they providing funds? We're seeking reimbursement on those, correct, Barry? Yeah, so we seek reimbursement for those invoices from the other parties, and that totals 75%. So the cost of the program in a year for suspension may not hit $480,000. It would be less. The cost savings are shared proportionately, 75% for the downriver states, 25% Wyoming, if that makes sense.
Harry, where do we fund this out of? What account?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lancaster, the funding for this program has always come out of Water Development Account 1. And that's what the proposal is for the upcoming year.
So if we don't fund this, then with the 50%, then we'll have a possibility of losing the program?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Glick, I believe in our conversations with the other states that if we do not have a 50-50 funding scenario, that they will no longer continue to fund at 75-25. And if this agreement goes forward, it is now structured at a 50-50 or cost share. So in that situation, Water Development Office would not have adequate funding to go forward with the program in 18 and 19.
Mr. Chairman? So Harry and Pat, you mentioned that the additional cost is about 120, do I remember, about 120,000, the additional 25%? Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay, so I don't want to get into the situation where we step on dollars to pick up pennies. So do you view that your opinion and Pat's is that this program is well worth it to Wyoming and our contribution to the other, to the rest of the basin? That extra cost is to our benefit long-term.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Seekin, yes, I believe that additional $120,000 is worthwhile. There are a number of areas of benefit both in-state. We talked about additional water being available for those appropriators on the tributaries, not the main stem of the Green. The main stem of the Green has adequate water resources, but certainly on the tribs. We talked about impacts if Lake Powell were to decline below the power pool, and that was a concern certainly in the last few years. There's a loss of revenue to the Bureau, and there are revenue streams that come from the Bureau into Wyoming. Ultimately, I mean, the worst case scenario is if the upper basin states are unable to provide their compact allocation to the lower basin states. That could trigger a compact call that would definitely move upstream and impact Wyoming appropriators.
So the if we're looking just at short term in the 120, we all want to gulp and say, you know, with our budgetary situation, but we could have long-term costs that far exceed the 120,000, or long-term financial negative ramifications that could well exceed the $120,000 additional payment.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Seekin, I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Do we know what the other states are getting from the other upper states are getting from the lower states to fund their weather modification? And also, is it comparable to what each state is bringing percentage-wise water, you know, from the upper states?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, yes, we do know, we have those numbers. I don't have them with me today, but I will tell you it's very comparable to Wyoming's program. And they are getting a 50-50 cost share with the lower basin. That's been going on for several years, and Wyoming's been in the 75-25 scenario. And so that has obviously caused some frustration and stresses. But they are getting very comparable to what we've been getting in the 300,000 to 400,000 range.
So,
like the upper tributaries, they're the ones that are going to receive most of the cloud seeding water. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Glick, the weather mod, the generators cover substantially most of the Wind River range. Because they're located on the west slope, we're looking at storms that move from the west to the east. We do have the one generator that would deal with storms that move east or upslope conditions. But they provide an additional snowpack over the entire range. So as that water or snow melts in the spring, it runs off through all of the tributaries, and the tributaries collect it and ultimately move it to the Green. Or, as we talked yesterday, there are benefits also to the Wind River because the impacts do move over the Continental Divide. Mr. Chairman, I was just going to point out on cost-wise, we're in the proposed 9-year agreement, the three lower basin states are agreeing to $1.5 million per year that would go into cost matches. So that's slightly more than what we're dealing with now. Currently, the cost match to Wyoming is $360,000. So if we were ever in a position where we wanted to consider enlarging the program, I believe that within the agreement, there's additional resources that we could look to the match, continuing that match with an expansion of the program. That's not being proposed at this point in time, but certainly I think the agreement is showing that they're going to bring additional financial resources to match weather modification efforts in the entire basin.
Any further questions?
So Mr. Chairman, there were some questions yesterday with regards to the cost of this water and how that compares with our development of reservoir space. And I asked Barry and Jason to at least pull some numbers that they aren't going to be exact numbers. This is weather modification, but to give you a sense of the cost of both water generated through weather modification and then reservoir costs. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To address that point of cost per acre foot of developing this water, you know, as part of our long-term research project, we did look at that. We went the next link in the chain. We didn't stop at additional snowfall, but then we also routed that into the system additional water, and ultimately it's about the water and what did that cost. What the study found was 5 to 15% increase in precipitation due to seeding. And then also we had to look at the fact that not all storms are seedable. Only about 30% of the storms, this was specifically in the Mid-Bow Sierra Madre that we did this very robust look. Only about 30% of those storms are seedable. And then scientists at the National Center for Atmospheric Research felt that we could get a 60% impact factor, impact area. We could impact the area above the 9,000 foot elevation. About 60% of that area we could affect. Routing all of that, the water, we came down to about between $35 to $107 per acre foot, depending on the effectiveness, whether you're getting a 5 to 15% increase. And now, while we did this robust look in the Mid-Bow Sierra Madres and Wind River Range, we didn't have quite as robust a look, but we did do hydrologic modeling and so forth using an uncalibrated version of the WRF hydro model. This was also done by the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and the results came up that they are very similar to those that were done in the North Platte. So we're in the ballpark, $35 to $107 per acre foot.
This works, right? Mr. Chairman, in regards to reservoirs, I looked at the cost estimates associated with about 13 reservoir sites that we're currently considering. So keep in mind that they range from preliminary cost estimates to cost estimates based on final design. In addition to that, I'm looking at numbers based on a 50-year lifespan, and that correlates with the 50-year typically would provide for a sponsor on a reservoir project. And I'm anticipating we're probably going to get longer lifespans out of the reservoirs in 50 years on most of these, possibly up to 100 years. So with the numbers I provide you, I'm going to give you the 50-year lifespan, basically taking the capital construction cost divided by the lifespan. And if you think out further to 100 years, you can just cut those costs enough. And a little bit further, I guess, categorization. We look at obviously new reservoirs and enlargements to existing reservoirs, and there tends to be kind of a split as far as costs, because obviously with enlargements to existing reservoirs, we have existing infrastructure, so there's modification to that, less material, so they tend to be cheaper. Okay, so with new reservoirs, we range anywhere from about $72, $73 per acre foot up to about $150 an acre foot at a 50-year lifespan, and that averages out to around $110, $115 per acre foot. For enlargements, like I said, they're cheaper, ranging anywhere from about $12.50 per acre foot up to about $110. That averages out to about $41 an acre foot. So just a comparison with the weather mod. Any questions?
Questions on that? Commissioner Langia.
Chairman Little and Harry. So if we make a motion to have you go forward with this, is it a 5-year contract, a 10-year contract, in perpetuity? How's that work?
So, Mr. Chairman, the request before you that we're bringing is for a 1-year appropriation. The agreement is not yet in place. So we want to make sure that we're in sync with the lower basin or the other basin states. But if it were approved at 50-50, it would go through with regards to a 1-year appropriation. Once the agreement is executed, if in fact it is executed by all the parties, and at that point, if we have secured funding for 9 years, then I guess the question for the commission would be, do you want to bring an appropriation for 9 years of weather mod at that point, or would you prefer to stay with single-year appropriations, recognizing that it would be at a 50-50 ratio at that point? So it's undetermined, but this request before you is for a 1-year appropriation for 2018-19 winter.
So what is the motion we make? Yes, we'd like to accept this.
So, Mr. Chairman, we talked about handling all of the projects in this particular section with one motion. You're a new commissioner, so hearing items 1 through 9, and then you would vote on those as a block. If you and the motion is typically to approve the director's recommendation. If you take exception to the director's recommendation, then you would pull that project out of the motion and handle it separately. This one, Mr. Chairman, I might suggest we have State Engineer Terrell on the line. You may want to consider this as a separate motion unto itself if you're so inclined.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the director's recommendation for the weather modification for the Wind River.
Second.
I second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Seek and seconded by Commissioner Geist that we approve the director's recommendation on the Weather Mod Wind River Mountains 2019 project. Any discussion on the motion? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Now, the select water does not have to.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, any recommendations coming from this meeting will be then placed in, positive recommendations will be placed in the omnibus bills. They will be draft bills that you will work the bill at your January meeting, and then select water meets the very next day, and then it will be their opportunity to work those bills. Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Making sure we're.
Okay.
We finish this block first and then we'll take a break. Okay, with that, let's go back to Glen Rock transmission.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, then under tab B, we have the Glen Rock Transmission Pipeline 2018. The community is requesting funding assistance to construct 2,300 feet of 12-inch transmission line in the northern portion of Glen Rock. The total project cost $785,000. A 67% grant is being requested in the amount of $525,950. And I would stand for questions. And do we have a representative from Glen Rock? Give them the names.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Randy Rumpler, Public Works Director for the town of Glen Rock. With me is Ray Catalier, a CEPI engineer. So answer any questions if you have any.
Questions of the sponsor?
Mr.
Fallon?
So was this project one of the recommended projects in the master plan study?
Yes, it is.
And is it toward the top of the recommendations or at the bottom, or?
It's towards the top. We moved a couple around. We put two together, made one big project. And this is, I think, tier 6, I believe.
Any other questions for the sponsor? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, the next project proposal under tab C as in Charlie is Lake DeSmet acquisition. This is a proposal that we brought to you last year with regards to an opportunity to buy some water assets that are associated with Lake DeSmet. They include 60, and if you look at the write-up, the first major bullet, water assets for sale. Storage water permits within Lake DeSmet that total 62,199 acre feet. That reservoir is currently owned by Johnson County. So with the acquisition of those permits, we are not acquiring the reservoir or the dam. What we are acquiring are the permits to store water there. With that storage of permits is an appropriate or proportional share of the O&M costs that would be paid to Johnson County. And currently, that arrangement is the owner, Sasol International, I believe, is paying their proportionate share on those permits to Johnson County. Johnson County owns and operates the reservoir. In Johnson County, there's a number of water rights beyond these 3 permits. Johnson County retains some. I understand Sheridan has retained some water rights there as well, and there may be others at this point in time. That's one component of the assets. There are reservoir supply permits that come from Rock Creek, French Creek, and Clear Creek. Those permit numbers are shown. Those are part of the package. Clear Creek diversion structure, which is a fairly substantial concrete diversion dam in Clear Creek that diverts water to the pump station and to Lake Healy. Healy Reservoir, which is a 5,140 foot or acre foot reservoir water's diverted from Clear Creek into it. It acts basically as the pool of water that can then be pumped either to Lake DeSmet, or water can be pumped back into Clear Creek later in the year. And then the water, or the Clear Creek water supply system, which consists of 6.7 miles of 66-inch diameter transmission line from the pump station to DeSmet, as well as the pump station. And then there's an inlet outlet structure located on the south dike of Lake DeSmet. So the negotiations that have taken place this last year, or this year, I should say, have been to acquire all of those assets. And with those assets, there's about 445 acres of land that are underneath Healy Reservoir, the diversion structure, and the pump station. That is part of the transaction. And the negotiated price that I negotiated, as well as Jason on Water Development Office, with Sasol representatives, is a sale price or purchase price of $2,500,000. Now, what we have done historically with any reservoir asset that the state of Wyoming has acquired, and I'm talking about High Savory, a Glendo contract for water, a Pathfinder modification contract with the Bureau for Water. Fontenelle Reservoir has 2 contracts, Palisades Reservoir contract, Buffalo Bill. The state paid to enlarge that facility and then got access to 190,000 acre feet of space in that reservoir. With each of those reservoir acquisitions, acquisition either through contract or we own the reservoir in High Savory's case, a separate and distinct reservoir O&M account was established. It was established with an appropriation typically from account 1, but sometimes account 2, to set up the account. And the account then, we use that for our ability to pay any O&M costs. So the bill comes in for a reservoir. It can be an O&M charge from the Bureau of Reclamation on the federal facilities. We pay that out of these O&M accounts. Likewise, if there are any water sales or contracts put in place, revenue derived from those contracts flows back in or is deposited into the account. And then any unspent balance is invested by the state treasurer, and so there's a return on investment there. The intent is that we set up self-sustaining O&M accounts for the O&M charges that are related to the specific facilities. So also with this request, I am requesting $2 million to set up a reservoir O&M account for Lake DeSmet and the associated assets. And at least initial discussions that we've had with Sasol representatives, we believe that those annual O&M costs will be in the range of $125,000 per year. So part of that is payment to Johnson County for the Lake DeSmet piece. There's also O&M charges for the pump station and operation of Healy Reservoir. So that's all wrapped into that. We would set up that account for that. So I am seeking an appropriation for a total of $4,500,000 to purchase that asset and set up the reservoir O&M account should the purchase be successful. So I have informed representatives of Sasol that while we may have agreed on a price, $2.5 million, the approval of that purchase and that price now rests with first the Water Development Commission, Select Water Committee, and then the full legislature, and ultimately the governor in terms of approving for this purchase. So they are aware of that, and with that, I would be happy to address questions.
How do we get a return on investment here?
So, Mr. Chairman, the return on investment for this purchase is to really look at the future in terms of what that water could be used for. If you look at the other reservoir assets that Water Development has acquired, and there's a couple of reasons why we do this. So in the Platte River Basin, and this Pathfinder modification That acquisition was made, or funding of that construction was made to set up an environmental account so that we were providing water for endangered species through the Platte River Recovery and Implementation Program. That keeps water users in Wyoming whole with regards to ESA compliance. We also acquired a municipal account which can be used by municipalities in the basin should they be in a situation where they are regulated off due to a call from the federal reservoirs. So there was another purpose. The Glendo contract that we have includes both of those reasons. So there's one reason. In the case of High Savory, we have constructed that reservoir, and that water is sold under irrigation contracts. Fontenelle, there's industrial contracts. So what we don't have in place out of DeSmet are any contracts. I shouldn't say that. There are a couple of contracts to provide water. These are prior agreements, so those obligations go on. So return on investment could take the form of future use of that water if an industry may come in. We've talked about in the recent Montana v. Wyoming litigation, one of the things that has been established is that Montana can in fact make a compact call across the state line. And right now this is specific to the Tongue River. So in that case, Wyoming irrigators that are post 1950 have been required to cease appropriation or cease diversions. One of the uses of DeSmet water could be to move it from DeSmet, which is in the Potter River Basin, to the Tongue River Basin. And in the event of one of those calls, that water would be used to offset. So Wyoming irrigators could purchase that reservoir water, release that to the system to make Montana whole, and then they would be able to continue their post-1950 diversions. There's an opportunity. We've also looked at, as a potential, moving these water rights out of DeSmet to a Bull Creek Reservoir project, which is upstream, and at that point it has the ability to serve more people, the town of Buffalo, other irrigators that are further upstream. And then, of course, if there are irrigators below DeSmet that might want additional water supplies, late season water, there is the potential for irrigation contracts. So I think at this point, all those ideas are wide open, but we do not have contracts in place that I can show an immediate return on investment. So this is really a future investment, I think, for the state of Wyoming.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Bud Fallon.
Is the only land associated with this the land under the reservoir, or for some reason I thought you said yesterday there was additional land associated?
Mr. Chairman, so the 445 acres is land under Healy Reservoir, under the pump station, under the Clear Creek diversion structure, and under the impoundment that the Clear Creek diversion structure creates. That is the only land that would be transferred as part of this deal. There is also an existing easement for the 6.7 miles of transmission line that would also be conveyed, because those are crossing other lands that are held either by other parties or by Sasol, and Sasol intends to sell all of its assets. So there is an easement that would be transferred for the pipeline, but that is the extent of land interest as part of this transaction.
How many post-1950 acres are involved in that scenario?
In the Tongue River Basin, Mr. Chairman, that's a question for the state engineer. I do not have that information, but we can certainly provide that from the state engineer's office.
And Mr. Chairman, follow up on that. The state got in the habit of picking winners and losers as far as water resources to mitigate whether or not people are on call or not on call. We need to have a serious discussion about a policy that in those circumstances, maybe there's
some diminutive value that the state receives back for that, and that ration of when people are out of call, when does the state actually step in? Is it compacts only? Is it different types of regulations or orders? But we need to kind of have that because it's not, I guess, consistent. And the state's not getting any money back for anything when they do that. So that's kind of a broad overall perspective that maybe we put on our agenda next year or something. Just wanted to bring that up while I was thinking.
Senator Chris. Harry, this is a 50-plus-year-old reservoir now. Who knows that's on leaks? What potential can we have coming ahead? I've been toured it, and the head gate structure is built under a tomb of concrete. You really can't get anything into. What kind of liability is the state going to be exposed to over the next, say, 30 to 50 years as these need replaced? Obviously, we're in conjunction with Johnson County are going to be looking at what potentially can be X number of dollars coming up.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Driscoll, so it was it 3 years ago, maybe 4, where we toured Lake DeSmet and actually walked down the main tunnel into the outlet facilities, the outlet valving, and took a look at that. My recollection there was that those systems were in pretty good operating shape. Now, you make a good point. Some of this equipment is 50 years old. And so equipment always requires maintenance. And we have that same issue on High Savory Reservoir, that we have valves and SCADA. So I think there's typically a maintenance function that goes along with it. That's going to be in the annual O&M costs. I'm not aware of any issues or certainly didn't see any at that point. I am aware, or we are aware, that there is pretty significant leakage. I believe it's through the right abutment of the main dam, the North Dam, when the reservoir is completely filled. And so as the reservoir level increases, and it's the last, is it the last 10 feet? 8 feet, that leakage increases significantly through the formation, the native formation, which I think probably has some scoria in it. And as a result, what Johnson County has done is they've chosen to operate that reservoir at the reduced level, and at that level, the seepage is manageable. And so that's the current operation scheme. I think in terms of a future liability or cost, that may be triggered if there's a need for that additional water. And then we start looking at the need to fill that reservoir to its complete or its currently permitted level, that there may be the need then, in fact, there would be the need for additional grouting potentially in that right abutment. I don't have an estimate of cost of that, and at least for the foreseeable future. In my conversations with Johnson County, their intent is to operate that facility at this lake level minus 8 feet. And at that point, there is not a significant safety of dams concern at that level.
How many acre feet the 8 feet amount to? And is Johnson County the proud owner of the leaky part of the reservoir, or are we going to be?
No, they're not. I am.
So, Mr. Chairman, as I understand it, the top 8 feet, the leaky portion, is shared by virtually most of the permits. So when I say 62,199 acre feet are in these permits, they're only being filled to this lake level minus 8 feet, which is about a 10% reduction in those permits. So, and again, I think there has to be showing routine demand for that water before the question comes, do we want to repair the abutment so that we can take full advantage of the full storage capacity?
What's the yield on it? I looked at an old study from years ago, and it looked to me like if these water rights actually get used, you're not gonna have a lake to vote on because it actually doesn't yield enough to maintain constant supply. Is that correct?
Well, so Mr. Chairman, Senator Driscoll, are the 3 permits that I am proposing for acquisition, do I have those dates?
They're old good ones, I get that.
One of them is pre-1950, which makes it very valuable. Montana is unable to call that right out. The other ones are post-1950, and it's roughly about a third, and a third. But in terms of a yield or the recreational potential, I would agree that if all of the rights were exercised every year, it's going to draw the reservoir down significantly. But hearken back that the Game and Fish and Johnson County have entered into a 99-year lease for leaving a block of water in that reservoir. That is a Johnson County obligation. It does not impact these 3 permits. Okay.
And also these permits are out.
I'm aware, when you look at
There, and there's lots of water in Clear Creek. So if we ever started filling from Clear Creek, the yield would be there. But out Plain Creek, the yield's probably not, is what you're probably.
Well, I just looked at whole consumptive use. I pulled the study up and, back to the aluminum plants. Trying to look at what we're actually buying, and I also don't want to be in a spot where we're draining it out and the voters are wanting to hang the rest of the world over it. Last PCBs and the pump station and the replacement of pumps and that, what kind of money and how fast does that have to be done? We know those are maybe more what's the time frame?
So, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about the pump station, a number of large 1,500 horsepower pumps in there that are used to move water from Healy Reservoir to Smith. Those have not been used for a number of years. So, and I would anticipate in the near future that we would continue that mode of operation, which is no operation or no movement from Healy to DeSmet. There are a couple of smaller pumps in there that are used to move water out of Healy Reservoir into Clear Creek later on in the season because Healy does not have an outlet. Those will have to continue to be maintained, but I do not envision at this point in time any rehab of that station. It is operating currently, and we would continue this limited operation of the pump station.
Yeah, Harry, I think the purchase of this is pretty admirable, and I stated that in the past, although I guess do you view this as a staged operation? In other words, as time goes on, we don't have any land associated with this to speak of. And you mentioned that Sasol is in the process of disposing of some additional lands. Are those lands adjacent to facilities? They could facilitate access or repair and maintenance of the pipeline down with the pump stations and all the facilities.
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Bettis, it's my understanding that Sasol is now moving forward, has been for the last year and a half or so, to totally divest themselves of their holdings in Wyoming. And that includes these water assets as well as about a 10,000 acre ranch. And it is those land holdings that It's my understanding that originally it was listed for sale as one package, water assets and 10,000 acres of land. Sasol has not sold those at this point in time, and they've now taken a move to break up the ranch into units. And at least one or two of those units are adjacent to the Healy Reservoir assets. So Healy Reservoir and those lands will be broken out of this 10,000 acres as a unit. There is another unit immediately to the north, and I believe there are some also land holdings that would be to the southwest of the water assets. So they're moving to sell all of those. Currently, with regards to maintenance, access to the pump station and Healy Reservoir is off of a state highway. That access is there. The access in question, not in question, the future access to maintain the pipeline would be through the easement that I mentioned. That would be our method of access.
But are any of the additional lands adjacent to that end or not, or just the lake, or just the Healy River?
With regards to this request, so, Mr. Chairman, I don't understand the question. Are you saying?
That's what I'm asking is,
If you look at this in phase one, is there any potential for us to acquire additional lands that allow better access to the Healy Reservoir and or the pipeline?
So, Mr. Chairman, if you go to the recommendation, there's a number of pictures there. One being the outside of the pump station. Access to the pump station is right off a state highway. There's a driveway, so there's not a need for additional access there. In fact, the other land holdings of Sasol are to the north of that, and we would not need to access through those lands at all. The diversion structure, which is on the, showing a picture there, that's on the other side of the state highway. The access there is to the state highway as well. So I don't know that there's a need for additional access.
If they put them up, the state will buy any one of their blocks if we need to. I mean, they'll be open to the public. If you think we need some more access land, when they put it up for sale, why, we could bid on just same as anybody else. This is the old Marton Ranch that we're talking about. John and his brother.
But, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, Harry, you don't see this as the first step of acquiring additional assets up here. You don't, whether land or additional water assets at this moment.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that this is the single purchase involved with this. Yes.
Any other questions of Harry? Commissioner Stuker?
One last question for Harry. Harry, you mentioned a new pipeline. Is there another phase to this that would be recommended by the Water Development Commission to make any improvements to this facility as far as water movement or storage? Besides, I know the storage aspect, but what about anything else to improve? Are the Water Development Commission going to come back and ask for additional funds to do something that may be already kind of required in this package?
Mr. Chairman, I mentioned a potential movement of water from DeSmet into the Tongue River Basin to cover future calls from Montana. Those efforts will require a new pump station and transmission line. The distance, I think, is about 5 miles. So that would be a future project if the state of Wyoming decides that it is appropriate that we build those facilities to offset calls, future calls from Montana. There's also been some engineering analyses of pumping water from DeSmet to Buffalo. So that would require new facilities there. I mentioned a transfer of water rights. That would require certainly petitions to the Board of Control to do that, but also generating some use of the water itself out of DeSmet. So I think there's a number of future projects. All of those would require additional investments by the state of Wyoming if we were to move forward with that.
Those would come through a sponsor, correct?
Well, potentially a sponsor, or maybe if it is the state of Wyoming that determines it's the best policy to provide replacement water in the tongue, it could be the state of Wyoming. Or it could be water users within the Tongue River Basin as well. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Any other questions?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, next project then under tab D is the Lusk Water System Improvements. And this project, Lusk actually brought two applications. The level 2 application that you have, which we'll touch on this later on this afternoon or today, is level 2 to drill a new well. My recommendation is to, well, and let me back up. Then this application under tab D, the level 3, was to build the pump house, install the pump, the electrical, the SCADA systems associated with a new well, and the transmission piping to tie that into the town's water system. So my recommendation to you is to not fund the level 2 study, which is the new well, and instead move those costs for the new well into this level 3 application, which we have done. So this application now in front of you, total project cost $815,000. We are looking at a grant, 67% grant of $546,050. And this then represents the entire package of drilling the well house, placing the pump, and then the electrical and transmission connections required to make that function. So it is one project instead of two. Questions? And we have a sponsor from Lusk.
Morning. I'm Todd Skruker, the Public Works Director for the town of Lusk, and with me is Bruce Preman of AVI. Will we entertain any questions?
So by combining these applications, does that result in a cost savings to the state, or are you just simply trying to shift money around to different accounts?
Mr. Chairman, since it was really my decision to combine those, the cost savings, I believe, would take two forms. One, from the administration of the projects, there's a savings in the office. We have one project rather than two. Secondly, the level 2 projects require an outside engineering consultant. We go through that process. The town, as part of a level 3, would retain an engineering company. So we have, in essence, 2 professional services contracts that would go forward. When you combine those services, there's a cost savings overall to the project as well. But I would not hazard to estimate a guess of what that would be. But so those are the 2 areas where I believe there's cost savings by combining.
Mr. Chairman, and is the town of Lusk okay with combining these?
Yeah, we originally had a method to our madness, I guess, but we respect the director's recommendation on this.
I guess I have one that if you got a secondary plan, if the funding isn't enough through the programs. In other words, if you're short when you open your bids, do you have a secondary plan and how you would accommodate the difference if there were one?
Probably not at this time.
Thank you.
Has there been any concern with the once this is, I mean, we go through and approve this and then put it into place that the EPA or the DEQ would come back and say, I mean, having, once again, revised their standards and requirements, that once again, this is no longer up to par because they moved the bar on it, because I know that that's been an issue with some rural development up in the Lance Creek area and that part of the world. So has that been has anybody voiced that concern?
Your question pertaining to the well itself? When we met with EPA about 3 weeks ago, and they have assured us they are going to lift the notice of violation and the order. I think I know what you're saying is if they lift the bar, I think we're kind of stuck. I mean, we have 4 wells that are right there. We're kind of stuck at that point where we'd be looking, we'd probably be pushed to treatment anyway at that point. So, if that answers your question.
Oh, it does. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, the next project is the Melody Ranch Water System Improvements 2018. Here we're talking about constructing a new well, associated transmission pipeline, and then replacement to increase the size of another transmission pipeline. The total project cost is $1,678,150. And the applicant or sponsor is seeking a 67% grant in the amount of $944,700. They plan to finance their local share with a drinking water SRF loan. Do we have a sponsor's rep?
I'm Lee Harris. I'm on the Melody Ranch ISD board.
And Eric Walkup with Nelson Engineering.
Questions of sponsor? Senator Meyer.
Yeah, the 400-gallon a minute wells are, can you pump those 24 hours a day or do you have to run down?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, the 2 existing wells can individually pump about 400 gallons per minute, but when combined, the existing transmission line induces high head loss, and we are not able to achieve 800 gallons per minute sustainable with those 2 wells in operation. One of the proposed improvements is to upsize the existing transmission line to allow those 2 wells to pump efficiently and gain maximum yield from those existing wells.
Mr. Chairman, I guess to follow up, why add a 3rd well to it if you don't have a transmission line to handle 2 wells? It seems like you're overbuilding in an area where you're already overbuilt, and your problem is either the transmission lines or the tanks, because you've got excess capacity right now as well. So why add to that capacity? Are you expecting like a 2-fold increase in population in the next 5 years? Or what other mitigating factors are out there that's leading you to overbuild in an area where you're overbuilt?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, there are high seasonal demands at some times of the year. The 2 wells are barely able to keep up with existing demand in the system. The sponsor has taken steps to reduce some of the demands by reducing leakage, but that's still not sufficient, particularly to provide the redundancy needed if one of those wells were to be out of service unexpectedly. So that forms the basis for a recommendation for a 3rd well. The 3rd well would be located a slight distance away, so there wouldn't be any interference effects between the 2 existing wells and the proposed 3rd well. It does require a new transmission line, as outlined in the level 1 study. I believe I can address one of your earlier questions. This area of Teton County has very plentiful and high quality groundwater. Land is quite expensive, and there is very limited opportunity for development of new storage, which might be appropriate in a different setting. In this case, groundwater is plentiful, accessible, and economical, and the costs associated with developing additional storage are quite prohibitive. So that's why we've elected to recommend a third well. Given other factors, maybe a possibility, but not here at Melody Ranch.
No more questions. Commissioner Lancaster.
Chairman Little and Nelson Engineering. So any chance of regionalization with the Hogs Island group? Because there's a well at Wyandotte that's a significant producer as well. Is that in the area close enough?
It's close in terms of a regional system. It's farther away than would be economical in this case. The proposed well is still located within the boundaries of Melody Ranch ISD, and extending that would require a significant step in regionalization that isn't in place at this time.
Follow-up question. So tell us more about water tanks. You say the land is expensive and not enough elevation?
Sure, if I may, there's one or two suitable locations for additional tanks. They're located much farther away, would require much longer transmission line than this proposed third well, on the order of a mile or more away. A suitable location for a tank would either require purchasing the land at a premium in this area of Jackson Hole, or arranging with the Forest Service for a long-term lease for a tank site and access, which is difficult to come by, particularly in that area.
Follow-up. How many users? Again, how many people have the system?
There's about 900 residents. So it's one of the larger housing areas in Teton County.
What amazes me is your water bills. Land may be expensive, but you guys have one of the cheapest monthly water bills of any of the other people that are here. Yeah. By a lot.
I mean, it's comparable with a few of the other municipalities or districts in Teton County, and that does reflect in large part the ready access to groundwater that they overlie with the district.
Any other questions of the sponsor? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, the next project under tab F is the Newcastle Well Project. We touched on this in terms of the planning project closeouts. So here we have the well number 5 has been drilled under a level 2 contract. Newcastle, with this level 3 application, is now requesting that we build the pump house, the well pump, electrical, SCADA. And then there's also, with regards to 2 other wells, well number 1 and well number 4, the need to replace the transmission lines from the wells into the system. So that is the scope of the project. Total budget, $740,000, of which the sponsor is requesting a 67% grant in the amount of $495,000.
I'm Mike Moore, city engineer for the city of Newcastle.
John Wetstein with West Wetstein.
Questions of the sponsor? Looks like you guys are getting off easy. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Chairman, the next project then is the Northwest Rural Water System Improvements 2018. And the scope of this project is we're looking at 2 different areas within their service district. First is the North End Service District, where they want to add 2 35,000-gallon storage tanks and a new pump station. And then the Sage Creek service area, which involves replacement of about 2,700 feet of 6-inch ductile iron transmission pipeline. Total project budget, $1,607,000. And they are seeking a 67% grant in the amount of $1,076,690.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, committee members, Mike Mackey, Northwest Rural Water District. Our recently completed level 1 study did identify these as our areas of most need at this time. And we've combined those into a single project for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of the sponsor? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, the next project under level 3 projects, the Sheridan North Side Transmission Line. Project will extend a 12-inch transmission line on the north end of the Sheridan water system. Total project budget, $2,590,000, which the sponsor is seeking a $1,735,300 grant, 67% grant. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Dan Roberts, Utilities Director, representing the City of Sheridan, and with me, Dayton Alsacker with Dow, here to answer any questions you might have regarding our project.
Questions of the sponsor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes new level 3 projects, Water Development Account 1.
Second. Okay, it's moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Wagner, that we approve the level 3 projects in account 1. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner
I don't
Butler.
know that this is necessarily in favor of or opposed to the motion, but it just seems to me like all of those housing developments outside of Jackson ought to be looked at in some sort of a regional system. We had Hog Island, we had Melody Ranch. I mean, there's a whole bunch of those guys. We're always jumping all over those guys in Star Valley because each little town wants their own, each little thing. And it seems to me that you've got the same problem with the development outside of Jackson. And that these little individual districts or little individual housing areas, they all want to do their own little thing, and water may be plentiful, but it seems to me that the state of Wyoming is really helping to subsidize each little district doing its own little thing because they won't like look across the street and talk to their neighbor. And at the commission, we've talked a lot about maybe doing these regional studies and trying to regionalize some of these things because it'll come up with some sort of a cost savings. I don't know how we fix that problem, but we don't seem to be moving in that direction. We did with Gillette, but we sure aren't moving that direction with anybody else.
Yeah, I would agree with Karen. I think this will come up with, and I talked to Kellen a little bit about this Bedford thing. You know, you've got Thane and Bedford, where you're trying to do a level 1 master plan. And in 2009, I think when they did the master plan for Afton Star Valley, I think at that time, I think it was Mike Besson that recommended that that become a regional thing for the whole thing. Yet I hope we're not going to get into the mode where we entertain all these little ones again. And I guess, I don't want to say double spend money, but spend additional money. Especially when adjacent entities are as close as they are to where the sponsor is making an application. I just think we could be more efficient with taxpayers' money.
Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. With that, shall we take a break? So, thank you.
I took-
Okay, Katie would like to remind me, or like me to remind all of you to please speak into the mics when you're talking. She's having a hard time picking you up sometimes. Also, it's come to my attention during the break, there's a City of Gillette vehicle with license plate 3766. You're parked in a work zone. And they would like you to move your vehicle, please.
Parked in what?
In a work zone, I guess. So. With that, I guess we will start in on level 3 project amendments. Harry?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the first project for your consideration is tab J. This is the Douglas Box Elder Spring. And as you can see, there's been 2 appropriations thus far, $1.4 million and then a $7 million appropriation. This project was really developed in 2 pieces. One was the Box Elder Spring improvements in terms of upgrading that and then moving to the transmission line. There were a number of difficulties in acquiring easements and access to the well spring in terms of expanding that, and that took a number of years. And so from a time perspective, it's put the project behind schedule. The request from Douglas is for a 2-year time extension. There are no additional dollars associated with this request. So.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Karen Rimmer. I'm the interim city administrator for the city of Douglas. With me today is John Harbarger. He's our public works director. We also have our city attorney, Eric Nelson, and Nick Larson with CEPI, our city engineering firm, and we would entertain any questions that you may have about this extension.
Questions of the sponsor?
We're just giving them more time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just time extension. Okay, I guess no questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman, the next project is the Evansville Emergency Connection. This is also an extension of time to extend 1 year to July 1st, 2019. I believe it was a previous meeting we talked about that this project was also delayed due to easement acquisition issues. And so a 1-year time extension is being requested by Evansville.
No sponsor representative here? Or? Oh, there we go.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Ryan Welsh, WLC Engineering. Here with me today is Dan Adcock, the Public Works Director for the town of Evansville. We'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Questions for the sponsor? Looks like there's no question. No questions for you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next project is the Gillette Regional Extensions 2017. So previously talked about phase 4 earlier this morning. This is what I would characterize as phase 3. It's the 3rd project. When this was funded, I believe it was funded last year, it was funded for design only. And you see that funding $540,000, or excuse me, $361,800 grant. So the project has advanced, and Gillette is ready to move forward with construction on this particular project. So the additional construction budget is an additional $3,570,000, of which there would be a grant increase of $2,391,900. It would make the total grant amount $2,753,700. And we do have a rep from Gillette, unless they're turning the lights off on the truck.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath from moving my car. I would be happy to take any questions on this project if anybody has any of them.
Questions? Senator Meyer?
Briefly.
You may have, I guess, the diversions coming back over the main pipeline project. And I didn't know whether, how large those diversions might be at this point in time. At some point in time, rather than reappropriating new funds, it might be appropriate for us to consider saying of the funds appropriated, you can use the money for this purpose rather than the original purpose. And Harry, I don't know how you normally do that. Into an account, those funds weren't appropriated from any account. They were legislative appropriations and AML funds for the most part, I recall. So necessarily that they don't have an account to be reverted back into. But that's, a discussion I think we need to have. I don't recall that legislation saying where any reversions go back, if it was just general fund or whether we captured those going back into one or the other accounts. But, if we've got a sizable amount of money that we know is going to revert, we need to start having those discussions. Maybe not on this particular issue, but probably soon.
So, Mr. Chairman, and I'll share this number, 30 million. It's projected right now that this $217 million project, the way it looks right now, it's not complete, but it potentially could be $30 million under budget. This funding did not come from Water Development 1, so at the completion of the project, any reversions will not be moving to Water 1. That's not in the legislation. So they came from a combination of sources. Senator Meyer mentioned AML funding, one of the sources. So I think that's going to be a question going back to the legislature of where those funds, the AML funds, I know will go back to the AML program, but if they were to be reappropriated for water development, that would be great. But I think that's a question for legislators in terms of where those funds will go back to.
Mr. Chairman, I think we laundered those. They were washed through the highway department or something and be determined that the actual AML funds were spent someplace else, and we switched that general fund appropriation that account had and put the general fund appropriation over into these or something like that. I'm sure if we didn't, we can figure out how to do that. But, we robbed
We actually laundered?
water development funds substantially. This might be a way to put a caveat on any reversions that the water development funds are made whole out of any reversions. I don't know whether we get that one to fly or not, but it might be worth a try.
We would probably vote for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We just got to get a few of you guys in the legislature.
Any more questions of the sponsor? All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next project then is the Green River Rock Springs Sweetwater County Raw Water Reservoir. This is the project that we took a look at this last summer on our tour. There have been some construction issues with regards to acceptance of this project, and the sponsor is working through that with the contractor and engineer now. But as a result of that, they are needing more time to deal with those issues, and so they are requesting a 2-year extension on their time or their project. So extending it to July 1st, 2020. Go ahead, Brian.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Select Water Committee. My name is Brian Seppi. I'm with the Joint Powers Water Board. We sure enjoyed having you all on the tour. Unfortunately, we weren't able to show you a full reservoir, and hence the request for an extension of time to allow those items to be worked out and issues with the contractor addressed. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions of the sponsor? Senator Moniz.
Identify.
Mr. Chairman, yes, we have, and an investigation, a geotechnical investigation has been completed, and alternative designs are being prepared by the engineer right now. Unfortunately, these types of repairs aren't conducive to winter, so it'll occur next summer. There's two alternatives being considered right now by the design team. Some compaction grouting and or remove and replace.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, under tab MC is the next project request. This is Mountain View Acres Connection. Mountain View Acres is a small district outside of Riverton. It's actually surrounded by Riverton on a couple of sides. And we have currently underway a large Riverton water supply project, which has been partially constructed over a number of years. But the plan for Mountain View was that when the final transmission line was constructed as part of the Riverton project, that they would then tap onto that line for water supply within their subdivision or their district. And if you recall, I think we've had some conversations, Riverton has actually asked for a time extension on that project. And the reason is that in order to get the transmission line run down from the new tank into this particular area, which is on the south end of Riverton, that they had to cross a piece of reservation land. And they were held up for a number of years in dealing with the tribal entities. And recall, of course, that on the reservation, the Joint Tribal Business Council was dissolved. And so all of that led into a delayed easement for the city of Riverton. And as a result, this project does not have a transmission line to connect to. So they are still intent on moving forward with the project if and when the transmission line is in place. And so they are now asking for a 3-year time extension with regards to this project. It's not a very big project, as you can see. The legislative budget that was approved was $95,000.
Sponsor representative? Apparently not. Do we have any questions of Ferry then on the project? Next one.
Mr. Chairman, the last amendment for your consideration involves a small water project program. You can see in the recommendation sheet that, and let me explain, especially for new commission members, on the small water project program, the program is authorized with an initial appropriation, and then as that appropriation is spent down, we request an amendment to increase the appropriation amount. And that's gone on for a number of years, but I believe it was 2014. Am I right? Don't quote me on that date, but the program was entirely reauthorized within the statutes with an appropriation. So at the top of the page, you can see presently available, as of September 26th this year, $310,000 and some change. That's what's left of that appropriation. If you look at the bottom of the page, you see an appropriation history since 2012, along with the number of projects per se. 2014, you funded $816,000 worth of projects. 2017, last year, 25 projects, $612,000 worth of projects. So our recommendation is that with the existing $310,000, you supplement that with an additional appropriation of $400,000, which would bring that balance to $710,000 available for future projects. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Questions of Harry? That's it for level 3 project amendments. So we'll need a motion on that.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the director's recommendation for amendments to level 3 projects.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Seacon, seconded by Commissioner Lancaster, that we approve or accept the actions on all the level 3 project amendments. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, it's about 11:45. Do we want to break for lunch or shall we get through another bunch of projects?
Let's keep going.
Let's keep going. Okay, then we will go on to level 2 projects.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next 2 projects, Fontenelle Dam and Glendale Reservoir for full utilization, have some similarities, so I'm going to talk about them kind of in the same context. Of course, and maybe Fontenelle Reservoir involves looking at riprapping a bottom portion of the embankment, which would then make available 80,000 acre feet of water that's currently stored, but they don't operate the reservoir at that level because for a number of reasons, but one of which is any wave action against that unprotected embankment would then cause damage. So the whole point of this project is to riprap that, make it available, and then at some point in time, Wyoming, again, in the context of a very severe drought, would be in a position that we could use that water. It would become usable, whereas now probably not. So we have a feasibility study going on with this project. Logical steps are to move forward with design and NEPA with regards to that project. So with regards to project budget, when the recommendation was published and put in the notebook, we did not have a budget number for you. I'm going to recommend $750,000 for that effort. The scope is still being revised with regards to the Bureau, and there's some question on how we might proceed. We've had some discussions with them about purpose and need of the project. So there's a whole lot of kind of loose ends floating around there as we wrap up our feasibility study. But we want to have budget in place so that we can go forward with the Bureau and say, okay, feasibility study is complete. We now want to move forward with design and NEPA. And so this budget would put us in that position. And with that, I'd be happy to address any questions, or Jason would be available also.
Commissioner Bettis.
In this feasibility study done, what type of issues that you ran into in putting this riprap on the bottom half? I don't believe that, at least from my experience, a normal thing. And I've heard everything from, if you leave the water down and it's like.
Nick, could you speak up? Nick, could you speak into the mic more?
Kind of stuff. I guess, have we run into any of those issues in the examination of how to get this done, I guess?
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Bettis, and is Tony here? No, okay. So, Jason, jump in if to add to this. But so the embankment to be riprapped is underwater. So in order to riprap that, there's a couple of options that the feasibility study has looked at. One is draw the reservoir down. And at that point, the embankment dries out, you're able to riprap, which is more of a conventional construction method. The problem with that is that raises a number of environmental concerns. What will happen to the fishery in the lake? What will happen to the fishery downstream of the lake? There is apparently a trumpeter swan population that winters on that section of the Green River. What will happen with them if there are reduced flows in the Green River? So that brings a set of environmental impacts. The feasibility study is also looking at placing riprap underwater. So that then has a cost implication, but riprap would be basically lowered. I'm thinking a clamshell type of equipment on a barge, so to speak. But then in order to assure that the placement is correct and proper, you're talking about divers. So there's a whole set of issues that go along with that. That's what the feasibility study is looking at, as well as raising the question of why does Wyoming want to do this? What is the purpose and need of this project? And so I know Pat Terrell has been very clear, and myself, in terms of actually testifying on a bill that Senator Barrasso has brought to authorize this project, of what are we going to use it for. And if you think about it, Continental Reservoir, generally there's enough water in the basin to fill that reservoir about 2 or 3 times a year. You don't normally see that water level at that lower level. Another impact is if you lower the reservoir to dry the embankment, you lose the ability to produce hydropower. So there's another set of impacts that come into play. But ultimately, the purpose and need that we're bringing forward is that Wyoming wants to be able to access this water in the event of a significant and severe drought in the Colorado River Basin, where a decision may be made to either move water assets downstream to Powell to assure power pool delivery or power pool elevations, or to offset a compact call that may come up. So it is truly a drought mitigation strategy, and that's the way we're approaching that. So those are, have I captured generally kind of the issues that we've been looking at with regards to this study?
Well, it seems that you can't lower the water down to put the riprap in. You can't lower the water down for any other reason. So why really address the clamshell scenario at all? Because you can't lower the water in the first place. So does that reasoning hold any meaning? I mean, you got the trumpeter swamps there, and you can't lower the water to put the riprap in. You couldn't lower the water for any other purpose.
Well, that, Mr. Chairman, so we're talking then about a future scenario. And so in today's context, where water users in the basin have adequate water, has adequate water for its intended purposes, those folks, those issues of trumpeter swans come forward. And of course, when you deal with those folks that manage those populations, Fish and Wildlife Service, Game and Fish, they start to question, well, do we need to do it now? Okay. But we're talking about a scenario that if Lake Powell is empty or nearly empty, if Flaming Gorge has moved its contents down, and we are now in a situation where we're talking about, do we shut down the Jim Bridger power plant? Is there enough water for municipalities along the basin, Green River and Rock Springs, that there is a much greater societal pressure that comes to bear to say, you have water in this reservoir, we want to make it available for use. And so those impacts on wildlife and fishery then would become, in my opinion, secondary in this scenario. But we don't have that today, so that's the context that we're debating. How do we place the riprap?
Commissioner Glitz.
How far down with the, well, I know they did pool there, but is how far down?
Mr. Chairman, and I don't have the elevations here, but we would riprap from the bottom of the existing riprap all the way down to the outlet structure, the low-level outlet for the reservoir. So, and in so doing, there's a pool of about 80,000 acre-feet of water that becomes available.
Any other questions for Harry? Okay, Harry.
Mr. Chairman, then Glendo Reservoir full utilization. Here we're dealing primarily with the Corps of Engineers, although it is a Bureau of Reclamation facility. Different type of project, but when water is placed in the flood pool, not every year, but certainly 2015 and 16, there was water in the flood pool, not this year. And the current water control manual that the Corps of Engineers uses, and they manage the flood pool, says that they will evacuate the water as rapidly as possible out of the flood pool when downstream conditions allow. And that has set up a scenario that when we get these wet springs, the irrigation demand is shut off below Glendo, and it's really below Guernsey that we're talking about. Wyoming irrigators, water that's been basically from Mother Nature, rain or precipitation, as well as Nebraska irrigators above McConaughey Reservoir, and their irrigation demand is not on. Well, the river system starts to drop, the weather systems move out, and the Corps is then dropping or releasing this water, and there's not really any irrigation demand. So the concept of the project is, let us continue to store a portion of the water in the flood pool until the irrigation demand comes on. We can then release that water. Irrigators can use it instead of flushing it down the system. And in so doing, those with storage contracts out of Pathfinder in particular then can save their Pathfinder water for a later day, whether later in the summer or into next year. So this also is a drought mitigation strategy. And so we've been working with the Corps in regards to that. At the same time, and this flood pool, we're talking about 18 feet of depth is the designated flood pool. So Glendo State Park, or the park system, has built a significant amount of improvements in the flood pool. So they have roads, they have restrooms, they have campsites that when there's water in the flood pool, it's inundated. So their concern, they have two concerns. One, we'd like to get water out of the flood pool so we can get our campsites up and running. But at the same time, they do like the concept of keeping water in the reservoir longer, because at the end of the irrigation season, and talking end of August, early September, they still have a recreational demand, but yet the reservoir is drawn down. So we're trying to look for that sweet spot that we can leave some water in the flood pool. We can look at minimal impact to those facilities. We can actually, we'll look at, this is what the feasibility study is looking at, can we raise a road or two, 1 or 2 feet, keeping water in the flood pool, and yet keep most of the recreational facilities open? So that's the balance we're trying to strike. That feasibility study is going to be wrapped up here in the next 6 months, basically. And the next logical step is a request to the Corps to modify their water control manual, which then dictates a NEPA process. And they've also said that they want to do additional investigative studies themselves. And so we want adequate funding to keep this project moving forward. And so we're proposing a budget of $750,000 for that action. Questions?
Mr. Budfeld.
I remember, what was the prior appropriation on this? I know that I was on one of the selection committees that actually started down this path. So I guess I'm confused as to why. Am I getting my projects mixed up?
I don't know that there's a prior appropriations question. The issue is management of the reservoir, because it's a Bureau of Reclamation facility, and they manage it whenever it's in the conservation pool. So from 0 to, I think, 470 some thousand acre feet. The Bureau manages that, and they manage it for irrigation downstream.
Wait, I understand all that. I must not have asked my question artfully enough.
Okay.
I mean, your answer was great. It just wasn't, I didn't ask the right question. Didn't we fund some sort of a master plan or a level 1 on Glendo this spring? And why is this different than what we already funded? You were with me. Okay, I'm not crazy.
Mr. Chairman, in 2016, you approved a feasibility study.
That's it.
$300,000 is the budget and due to be completed. So that then brings all of these issues together in one document. What are the impacts to state parks? How much water can we realistically keep in the flood pool? What is the increased risk for flooding? Because now you've kept water in the flood pool, and if you get another storm on top of that, there's less flood storage. That's what the Corps of Engineers is concerned about. All of those are being wrapped up in the feasibility study. And in order, again, and you know NEPA better than most, if the Corps is to make a change now based on this feasibility study, they have to go through a NEPA process. And what they're saying to us is that we don't have any funds to do NEPA, so if you want NEPA done, state of Wyoming, you will need to fund that effort. And along that route, they have also indicated to us that they want to do some additional, and that deals with flood risk downstream, further down in the system. We've looked at flood risk to Glendo Reservoir, basically. So all I can tell you is that is the next logical step to move it forward. We are dealing with the federal government here, and this is what they're lining out as the next logical steps.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, you have my sympathy for dealing with the federal government, but I don't understand how you can start a NEPA process when we don't have a preferred alternative or a preferred direction to go first.
So, Mr. Chairman, from the feasibility study, we will look at the amount or the depth in the flood pool that we would like to retain. And in 2015 and 16, when water went into the flood pool, I wrote a letter to the Corps of Engineers asking that they keep 3 feet in the flood pool. And they denied that request both years because they then referenced their water control manual, evacuate as rapidly as possible. So we're looking at that depth. That preferred alternative will come from this feasibility study, or we will make a decision on what is the depth we want to retain. At that point, we can make the formal request to the Corps to modify the flood control plan to keep an additional amount of water in the flood pool for a short period of time until irrigation demand comes on.
So you don't think you're, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
We're not getting the cart before the horse. I mean, I've read hundreds of NEPA studies, and you study your preferred alternative. So you're sure this feasibility study is going to say we need to keep 3 feet additional in the flood? I mean, if we already knew that we were going to keep the 3 feet, why did we spend the $300,000 to do a study that says we need 3 feet?
Mr. Chairman, we do not know at this time whether 3 feet is the right number. When I wrote those letters, that was in conjunction or in communication with state parks. I would like to keep as much water as possible from an irrigation standpoint, a water conservancy type of approach. And so 3 feet at the time, and those were letters that were drafted. Water's coming into the flood pool. Here's where we're projected to go. And in talking with state parks, they said, well, we can, for a short term, we can live with 3 feet. That's the number that went out in the letter, but that is not a long-term approach. And so once we have the feasibility study in hand, we will look at the impacts at 1 foot of elevation, 2 feet, 3 feet, and we're up to, was it 8 feet? 7 feet? We're looking up to a maximum of 6 feet. But with each increase in depth is additional impacts to the state parks. And so they're part of the review team that's looking at this. We will have, that will be a negotiation that ultimately we will share with the commission, but that will form the basis of our preferred alternative. That's one piece of the feasibility study. The other part of the feasibility study is to demonstrate to the Corps that the additional risk by keeping water in the flood pool 30, 60 days longer is not all that significant. And so that's what we're bringing together in this report. But at this point, we have not asked the Corps, other than my letters, and those were 1-year requests, but now we will be requesting a permanent change in the water control manual. That then triggers the NEPA process.
Chairman? And if you've answered this, I apologize. So when will this $300,000 feasibility study be complete? The one that you guys set in, is that?
Our contract expires in June, but we've been done probably in March.
Okay, so when you have that final report, then you're looking for this to dovetail into that. And you've already got probably a lot of draft information already in hand from that study. So.
I would add that some of the draft results that are coming back we're looking at probably a foot to maintain that flood water. Because if you get up or in the 8-foot range, you have to start having major impacts to the state parks, and you have to consider wave action and things of that nature. But we'll have the answer to move forward with NEPA before the dollars are probably even have been appropriated through the legislature.
A couple things. Is taking into account the impacts on downstream communities when the evacuate is rapidly as possible, order is in effect, because I know Arlington has major impacts there with different things. So Mitchell dollars got blocked. What's happening now is that when they evacuate as soon as possible, are actually causing downstream flooding. So I'm not sure what's, I mean, I don't think we've talked about the impact on state parks, but I didn't know whether you look at the downstream communities. And then how much water do you gain per foot of elevation? At 3 feet or 6 feet, there's 275 in the whole flood pool, but what is that gain? I see we don't have a number of acres that the project will serve there. It's not available, but does the study say the number of acres that this is going to serve? Those type of things. So we know the benefit, to the downstream irrigation folks and the benefit of downstream communities as well as the state park. Not the state park isn't just very important, but there's other players.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Meyer, on your first question with regards to downstream releases, so what the Corps does as they evacuate the reservoir as rapidly as possible, that they are looking at what are the flows in Torrington, Scottsbluff, and they're taking into consideration what are the contributions from the tributaries, the Laramie River being the big one. And they're taking that all in the context. But in that scenario, the river level is generally dropping. So the river is receding from what those maximum flood levels have been when they were putting water in the flood pools. So they take that into consideration. Is there some flooding that's occurring still? Yes, but it is diminishing. So we've not looked at the economic impacts of additional flooding in Scottsbluff because generally with Glendo in place, those are pretty minimal, I'll say. Do people have water in their basements? Yes, in some cases, and water's up on bike paths and things like that. But that's kind of where they keep it as they're filling the flood pool. And then as they release it, they're not exceeding those levels. So then questions with regards to acres served. Here's how. So we're not talking about a new use for water in the flood pool. We're talking about water in the flood pool that will be released at a slower rate. And as it's released out of Glendo in the flood pool, it is considered natural flow, which means that the North Platte modified decree comes into play. 75% of that water, natural flow, is allocated to Nebraska, 25% to Wyoming. So irrigators up and down the river will be able to use that water for direct flow diversions for irrigation. But it's not allocated to one district or another. It just becomes natural flow.
Any other
Oh,
questions?
so third question, Jason reminded me, the volume of water. So 1 foot, so as you start into the flood pool, the first foot of elevation is about 13,000 acre feet. And then as it goes up, it increases a little bit per foot basis as the reservoir gets bigger. But in 15 and 16, when I wrote my letter, it was for a 3 foot retainage, 39,000 acre feet. So about 13,000 an acre foot. So thank you.
Any other questions of Harry on the Glendo project? Okay, we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, next item under Q, Green River Rock Springs, Sweetwater County Joint Powers Water Board Pump Station and Transmission Line. They are requesting level 2 funds to look at the feasibility of investigating redundant pumping supplies from the Green River Water Treatment Plant that you visited this summer, or not through it, but certainly with it. And then the transmission line capacities that serve both Green River and Rock Springs. And these improvements were identified as a task in the 2009 master plan that was done for the Joint Powers Board. So, Brian?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Select Water Committee, my name is Brian Seppi, Director of Engineering. You might recall at the end of the tour, I pointed down to the river some construction activities that were going on. That is associated with an optional sales tax project that was approved by the county that rehabilitated the dual segment of our transmission system between Green River and Rock Springs. So this study here would pick up where that project led off and look at ways to provide that redundancy and address future capacity for the last segment, pipelines and the treatment plant itself. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Commissioner Bud Fallon?
So will this be the last study that you need before you can actually start proposing projects?
Chairman, to answer your question, Commissioner, I see, looking at the list of projects that we've come in, where that question would come from. The board is the owner of the systems in each town. So the study in 2017 will be a project that the city of Rock Springs will ultimately be responsible for. The board will be the sponsor. We will incur the debt, obtain the funding. We will seek reimbursement essentially through a pledge of revenues from the city of Rock Springs. So in essence, that will be a Rock Springs project through the board, and we will be responsible for it. This project that's proposed here would be solely the board because it serves both City of Green River and the City of Rock Springs. So the hope would be to come back to you with one of each, if it's so palatable.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
See you, Brian. Mr. Chairman, the next project is the Lander Test Well Study under tab R. Project that was presented to you last year. Let me verify that. Actually received in 2015, and due to insufficient funds, the commission denied the request at that time. The community is bringing back this request. The request is to drill and again, under a level 2 contract, so drill a production size well into or close to your water treatment plant, correct? And that would function as a supplemental water supply for the community of Lander. Currently, they use surface water, and so this would be supplementing that. This is fairly deep well potentially, and so the cost budget, $2,340,000 to drill the test well. Questions?
Sure. Lance Hopkin, I'm the City Engineer and Public Works Director for Lander, Mr. Chairman, and be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Any questions for the sponsor?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Butterfield.
Was this something that came out of the master plan from 2010?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Phelan, in 2004, we did a well siting study for the city of Lander. And it was a regional study, and out of that, we drilled a level 2 test well, and it was purely a test well. It was not intended to be a production well. It was to test multiple aquifers that were available on the mountain front off the northern flank of the Wind River Range. and we narrowed a site down. It was close to infrastructure in the valley at the Middle Fork of Kaposia. And we did drill a test well that tested 3 aquifers, the Ten Sleep sandstone, the Madison limestone, and the Flathead sandstone. Flathead sandstone is the oldest sedimentary rock present in the state of Wyoming, right above Granite, where it's at that time we were really focusing on Madison. Ten Sleep tested pretty well. It tested about 1 million gallons a day, 700 gallons a day. Madison was a disappointment. It was pretty tight, no fracture, no porosity. It flowed about 20 gallons a minute. We had budget left to keep our driller moving down, and we drilled all the way down to this Flathead sandstone, which actually tested very well. The Flathead is a fairly rare aquifer in the state, but is prolific in the area south of Ten Sleep, Wyoming. There's some real good Flathead wells there. So with that information, we were able to supply the city at that time with some options, either the Ten Sleep formation or this deep Flathead formation. The Madison is still a possibility. We just didn't hit any of the karst cave fracture systems that we thought we would encounter. So yes, then there was the later 2010, 2008 master plan. And the 2008 master plan just picked up on that earlier information and still recommended this project.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, is this well drilled on the basis of the Water Development Commission guaranteeing the production, or is it city totally Lander funded?
Chairman, Commissioner Suker. So under this level 2 program, Water Development will fund 100% of the cost of drilling the well. And then should it be a good production well that Lander wants to bring into their system, they would bring an application for a level 3 project construction, which would also then include at the time Lander purchasing the well for 1/3 of the value to drill it, which gives you a 67% cost share or grant, local.
So we, or the Water Development Commission, truly has 100% of the risk on the drilling.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Thank you.
Questions of the sponsor? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, the next project is the Little Snake River Valley Municipal Water Supply Project, Level 2. The towns of Dixon and Baggs have filed a joint application with you requesting a Level 2 study to investigate the potential for a regional system in the Little Snake River Valley. The study would identify upgrades necessary for the existing water treatment plants, because there's a surface water treatment plant for each of those communities, and then also look at any rural customers that could be served with regard to a regional system operated between the two entities. The recommended budget, $135,000.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Ryan Dubay with Link Associates. Eli Allen, Mayor of Dixon.
Any questions for the sponsor? No, nothing. All right, thank you.
Chairman, then the next project, the last project in this section for Level 2 project is the Lusk Water Supply Study Phase 2. This is the project I mentioned earlier where they wanted to drill the test well under a Level 2 program. We've rolled that into the Level 3 application that you've now approved, and so my recommendation is for no funding with regards to this application.
A representative from the sponsor? There's not. Yeah.
Of left. Oh.
Mr. Chairman, sponsor went ahead and left, headed back on the roads.
Sponsor took off, headed back. So, any questions of Harry or Keith then on the project? With that, that's the end of Level 2 projects. So,
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the level 2 projects as outlined in the spreadsheet.
In other words, accept the director's recommendations. There you go. Commissioner Evans, seconded by Commissioner Wagner, that we accept the director's recommendation on all Level 2 projects in Account 1. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, with that, now do we want to take a lunch break or? Okay, we will take a 1 hour lunch break. Is that enough?
Well, I'll make it 1:30, that'll give you an hour.
Okay, we'll make it 1:30 then. We'll meet back here at 1:30.